Thank you for being on. Thank you for making the drive and fitting us into your busy schedule. I know that you live in Missouri, but you also live in Florida and you train down in Florida. So whenever you have time here and you're sparing it with us, I really do appreciate it. I know it's limited.
No, I love being able to come do this. It's cool being able to get your story out and kind of tell what's going on in life.
Yeah. So, I mean, the last time I saw you fight was at NFA. Actually, the last 3 times I saw you fight were at NFA. And you've been kind of on a spree here, man. You're really putting guys away and really having dominant performances. I know that at this point in your career, it's all about the trajectory to get back into the UFC. But if you don't mind, I do kind of want to take a step back and talk about that first run to get there.
Mm-hmm.
How you got into MMA, amateur career, pro career that led to your first appearance in the UFC, and then we'll go from there. But because I know a lot about you, but I feel like there's just a lot of things that are lost in nuance, and I'd like to hear it from you, if that makes sense. Yeah. So just kind of go, from the beginning, because I know you trained with like Pat Smith and the guys at the pit, but how did you meet Pat? How did you get into MMA?
It's a crazy, 360, how it all just comes full circle. So when I was 4th, 5th, 6th grade, around there, my dad was fighting MMA actually. And he fought on Patrick's promotion, Cage Championships.
Jesus.
So I got in the loop with that, and I never thought I would fight. I remember watching my dad fight a couple times. I'm like, this is cool, but nah, I don't think I want to do this. And 18, grew up wrestling, went to college. First semester, it was like, not for me. Not
just
for me.
School? Just school in general?
Wrestling.
Oh.
School didn't mind it. I didn't really, was always like, wasn't like the smartest, but I could do it. If I just applied myself, it came to me, I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of done wrestling. I think I want to take a fight.
What was it about college wrestling that first semester that made you go, not for me?
I don't know, man. I think it just wasn't fun, And I knew that I didn't want to put the work in for that. I just didn't. I don't know. It was something like it was just a segue in my life that it was like, we'll go this route or this route. And fighting, I was just like, yeah, I'll give it a try. And man.
So you had the passion for wrestling in high school.
Right.
And then when you went to the university, it was just kind of like escaping you.
Mm-hmm.
And then was there any sort of push to fighting though? So like, I understand that you're deciding that wrestling is not there for you, or it's slowly not becoming a passion. But was someone around you saying like, hey man, like you should try fighting? Or were you kind of catered towards that because of the wrestling background?
Right. Yeah, that was it exactly. It was kind of that, that driving factor of wanting to compete still. Yeah. But no one was like pressuring me to fight. No one really in my circle was in, the fighting. My dad did, but he was done fighting for years at that time. So I just was like, I'm going to give it a try. I trained on my own. Took a fight on Patrick's show. I fought Freddie Kostajevic.
Kostavarich?
Yeah.
Back when you guys were amateurs?
Yep, it was my debut, his debut. Got the win and was just hooked. You know how it is, that feeling, that first win.
When you say you were training yourself, do you mean like what, like out of your own house, like on a bag and just saying like, hey, let's put it together?
Bag. I would go to open mats, couple wrestling practices a week. I was training like 3 days a week, and I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to do this. I'm training hard.
Well, honestly, not to be devil's advocate, but like if you're a college level athlete, you kind of can go into amateur MMA like 3 days a week and probably crush it.
And it was like that, at first, and the fights were easy, and I wasn't doing anything right. The training wasn't right, my diet wasn't right, the weight cutting wasn't right, but the winning was happening, so I wasn't changing anything,
Do you think that's kind of like a death spiral, though? Because it's like success bred the incorrect way will kind of lead you astray. Mm-hmm. It'll give you an ego like, well, I know what I'm doing because I'm winning. You know what I mean?
100%.
So what was the catalyst to then stop doing that? Like when did you start?
Loss.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It'll humble you, right?
Yeah, that was it, 100%. So I was like 3-0. Then I lost my first amateur fight. And then I was like, maybe this ain't for me. Maybe I'm not going to fight. And then it just kept, I got that itch. I'm like, And then Patrick messages me, hey, got a show coming up. Do you want to fight on it? I'm like, I'm really not training right now, but maybe I could get back in and fight. And he's like, well, you could start training here. And I'm like, sure. I know Jake trained there. And I'm like, yeah, I'll go there. And that's when I first started seeing like, oh, you have to do this every single day.
Well, there was also some killers at the pit at the time. So like you were coming in at the time where was Andrew Sanchez still down there?
In and out, you know.
In and out still.
Right.
But then you also had Jake Collier. You had some guys that were like, I mean, they also went and fought in the UFC. So I'm sure that room wasn't,
Right.
It's no slouch.
No, and I'm the smaller guy in the room, and we don't have the bodies to be like, oh, you're going 55ers, you're going 85ers. No, everyone was
going with everybody.
So I got the real, feel of you train every single day. We don't have the luxury right now, you're not in the UFC. You got to be able to be in shape on your own. Like you're taking care of your running, your cardio. That's on your own time. You're not here to get in shape. You're here to learn and grow as a fighter. So that really opened my eyes there.
That's actually something I think a lot of fighters don't understand is like they think that when they come to the gym, that's like when they got to get everything done. And I always say like, you're coming to the gym to learn how to fight. Everything else should be done on your own time. You should have that own discipline.
Yeah, 100%.
If the only conditioning you're doing is on the bikes at the gym, or the only lifting you're doing is with the equipment at the gym, why don't you have your own membership to a 24-hour place where you can go and do your own lifting, your own running, and all these other things? Like, act like you care. Act like this is important to you. Was it a culture shock going from college wrestling to training yourself to then going to a fight gym?
Yeah, it was hard to humble myself, like, because I thought I was the shit, I'm like, wrestling, have success there, and then fighting was having success early and not doing it the right way, and, I'm 18, 19 years old, and I'm a freshman in college, I'm fighting, I'm on top of the world, winning fights, partying, not doing anything right, and you get a slice of humble pie, and man, I always look back on like the early days, and I'm like, I wonder if I'd have lost my first fight if I would have kept fighting. If I would have been like, oh no, there's no way I want to do this, but it's those little moments, you get to pick. You go left or right, and I always end up picking the right routes, just something always led me to the right directions.
Terribly sorry to interrupt the content that you're enjoying right now, but if you've been watching our content for the past couple of months, you realize that Easy Talk is a brand new podcast. We're genuinely trying to figure this thing out as we're going. Some growing pains for sure. If you are genuinely enjoying this content, we feel very humble in that, but we would like to ask that you would also subscribe and like to the channel, simply because it does help us in the algorithms and ultimately to grow. So take a second. I'd really appreciate it. And on with the show. Do you think if you would have lost that first fight, you would have quit? You were talking about how you have this competitive nature in you. Do you think you would have quit, or do you think you would have competed in something else? Like, what do you mean when you say, like, if I would have lost that first one?
Right.
I'm thinking?
Well, you know how fighting is. Like, when you lose, it's like
lowest of lows.
It is. So you go out your first time, and already the nerves are unimaginable as your first fight. And you lose, and let's say you don't even lose. You go out there and you just get hammered on. That would be hard, I feel like, to want to do again.
When you say hammered on, do you mean like win, but it was a tough fight?
No. If you went out and lost and you just got like
demolished,
an ass whooping, TKO, or just 3 rounds of dying. That first time going 3 rounds is even like, holy shit, this is hard.
15 minutes doesn't seem like a long time until you're in a cage, man. I simultaneously though, I often tell people, well, it's 9 minutes as an amateur, but I tell the amateurs, I'm like, I know it feels like this is such a monumental occasion, but that fight will be over before you know it. Like those rounds go by so quick, but that fatigue sets in so fast. It's so weird. Fighting is, I would strongly advise that every person on this planet gets into a fight, especially like, a sanctioned one where there's like referees.
Right.
Don't go to like a local bar and get into a fight, but it'll teach you a lot about yourself. And if you ever, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but like some of the coolest, most humble people I know now are also some of the most ego-driven when it comes to competition. But like, throughout like every other aspect of life, all the fighters that I know are just chill guys and girls, like relaxed, little little phases them, very little ups and downs. They're kind of like ecstatic because they have experienced this like highest of highs and lowest of lows. The rest of life just feels normal. Like
Right,
whatever.
you just stay on that median, you're always cruising.
There's traffic. You're like, whatever, we'll get there when we get there. Like, I'm not really too worried about it. I don't know. I find that there's a correlation between people that have done martial arts and just being prepared for life. And it's like, I think it's one of those things that people say, like, you should be a server, you should serve your country. And like, there's like kind of these prerequisites to be like a functioning member of society, like a good one. I would say like do a year of martial arts,
Right.
Whatever martial art you want to do. If it's boxing, kickboxing, whatever, but do a year. I think you'll come out the other side a better person, but I'm biased. So Pat got you into the gym. You're training with some of these killers, a lot heavier than you. What's the rest of your amateur career look like after you start training with them?
So I was 3-1 when I started there. I think I finished my amateur career 9-1, and then we're like, there's nobody left to fight. We fought everybody around here at 55. And
did you ever flirt around with possibly going 170 as an amateur just to?
I had like maybe two fights at amateur at 70, and I just always knew, like, now I walk around like I'm a big 55er.
Yeah.
But at
you
the
were also
time,
young, dude, 18, 19, 20.
right, I was
You're
so
not done with
little,
puberty.
right, and I was walking around 65, 70 maybe at the time, and now I'm walking around like 85. So, fought all the guys we could fight, turned pro, and then was, I think, 4-0 before I got my first loss as a pro. But like I said, right when I started with Patrick, that really put my belief in him. I was 10-0 with him right out the gate, and just not even the wins that were the most important thing to me. It was just like the life lessons you're learning, like all the things that he stood for, how firm he was and soft, like soft spoken. Not really, no one's gonna walk all over him. Everyone respects him, but he knows what he's doing, and he's so, like, the path was there. Like, I could see it myself. Like, it's like someone just turned on a flashlight in the dark for you.
He mentored you.
Yeah, 100%.
He was your coach, but also a mentor. Do you think that he helped kind of shape the adolescent you? I know that I said this before, but I often say, like, we as young men, like, we kind of take and pull from various mentors we have, like whether it's a teacher, a coach, obviously your parents, maybe an older sibling, maybe like, a friend. But it sounds like Pat was a pretty big mentor to you.
100%. He's, like I said, I talk to that man every single day, like always on the phone with each other, talking. When I'm home, I'm training there. And not only that, he's also my father-in-law. So
I did not know that.
For real?
That's crazy. So you married to his daughter?
Yeah.
Dude, talk about, you know what?
Right?
That's got to be one of the most, like...
Scary?
No, like most... like, what greater respect can a man give you than the hand of his daughter?
Right.
That's like, I trust... Because obviously, I have a daughter, so I'm just saying this, like, as a father. If I'm going to, like, give my daughter's hand to a man in marriage, I want to make sure that this guy is, like, honorable, sacrificing, a true, dignified, responsible man. So that's kind of cool. Like, I kind of like that. That's a huge respect.
And, like, I remember when...
What was that conversation like?
So, when me and her first started talking, like, I was training, she came in to get the keys or something, to borrow the car
and you
or something.
were like, who's that?
I just remember looking, I'm like, who the heck is that? And Jake's like, yeah, that's Pat's daughter. I'm like, oh, yeah, I figured it was. Didn't act like... And then, I guess we started talking at one of his shows, actually. And,
How old were you? How old were you when you first, like, saw her?
See, it's 2014, so 30 now, I guess, right at 20.
Okay.
Right at just turned 20, maybe 19.
Like, okay.
And she told him first, like, hey, I'm talking to someone in the gym, and he's like, dang it. I was starting to like Dakota, too. She's like, how'd you know? He's like, God.
He's the only young guy your age. Makes sense.
But I remember going to training. I was on my way back from college, and I was stopping at the gym to train. And I remember warming up. Jake takes me down in the middle of the mat, and he's bigger than me, and he's so much better than me at the time.
Talking about Jake Collier.
Yeah.
Well, that's a
holding
rough guy
me
to have
down.
on top.
And I remember Patrick getting down, like, face level with me, and I'm on the mat. I'm, like, eating the mat, and he's like, that's my firstborn, right? I'm like, yes, sir. You tell Jake to get off me now.
No, he's sending a message. That's beautiful. I love that though, because like I said, it's he's your mentor, and then he thinks so highly of you that he would give you the hand of his daughter. I love that. How long did you guys date for before you proposed?
We got married in 2018. We started dating in 2014. So I think maybe 2 years
And then you
before.
propose, and there's the layover before the wedding. What was
Right.
the wedding like with Pat? And
Oh man, he's the father gives the speech, and he was saying, yeah, when Gabby met him, I was excited. This guy, he's in the gym, he trains hard, he loves fishing and hunting, and he's just a good guy. And then she met Dakota. I'm like, man, he's always ripping on me with something like that, but it was good. It's such a tight circle, and that's what's I feel like a lot of my success comes because so much of him caring and being attentive and understanding the game, and I'm around like now like the highest level of guys, coaches, partners, and it's so crazy to me that Patrick had this understanding. And the gym is as big as this room, and he understood the high level of MMA, and it's just crazy. And him and Mike Brown talking at Grant's last fight, and they're
Grant
just
Dawson.
yes.
Sorry,
yes,
forgive
yeah,
me.
No, you're good. You're good. And they're rubbing elbows and just the same things. It's crazy to see how much it correlates, and I'm just so grateful and lucky that I stumbled upon him.
I do want to. There's a series of questions I want to ask, but forgive me because I want to stay kind of chronological.
you're
But
good.
I will get to this. You said that you went 10 wins out the gate with him, but then when you were 4-0, you suffered your first professional loss. Walk me through that moment, because you had that first amateur loss and you were starting to doubt yourself. Can I do this? All these things. Obviously, you stayed with the sport. You went 10 wins straight with Pat, and then you got your first professional loss. What's that night? What's that week looking like? Are you doubting yourself? What are you thinking?
So, would have been my second fight, I believe, with LFA. So, um, fighting on TV, you're starting to feel like, all right, I'm doing the right things.
On the
I'm
right
headed
path?
in the right route, and go out there, lose a 30-27 decision. Just wasn't my night. The guy was better than me that night. It happens. So, I was not discouraged at all, though. I knew, I'm like, we just got to get in the gym. We got to fix the problems that came up, and we knew exactly what. It was such easy fixes. The little things that are easy to fix. It's just tedious, like making the right decisions at the right times in the fight, and maturity was a huge thing. I was still young, and went back home, worked on them, fixed them, and just start stacking them again.
What's the difference between the Dakota Bush that lost that first amateur fight and this Dakota Bush that lost that first pro fight? Because the first amateur fight you're talking about, maybe there's some doubts in your head. Yet the first pro fight that you lose, you're like, we can fix this, we can bounce back. Was it the people in your corner, the fact that you were training out of your house or
Right.
garage the first time? Now you got a team behind you. Like, walk me through what that difference is. Is it maturity? Just you're older,
Right.
wiser?
I think it's a culmination of all those. Maturity for sure. Having the guys like Patrick and my wife, and just a motivating factor of I put so much into this. I know that I love this. I know this is what I want to do. So I have to navigate what I have to fix to be able to not let this happen again. And we just went home and we worked on those things. And every loss I had, we've done that. We've really just honed it in and focused on, all right, this is the main things we did wrong. Let's focus on fixing those. And it's hard sometimes. It's hard to humble yourself after, you go on big wins, like big win streaks. And
10 wins. You probably haven't lost for what, 3 years,
Right.
4 years?
it was a good chunk of time. And but it's good. You need those losses. Like I truly am thankful for all my losses that I've had in fighting. It's made me such a better human in person, and B, it's just made me such a a better fighter in so many areas.
Yeah, John Kavanaugh, Connor's coach, actually, he has this like, he wrote a book, but and one of the chapters is literally called "Win or Learn." And I just like the way that that's space, not necessarily just for martial arts, but like any aspect of life, right? If you fall short on in any achievement or in any endeavor, I mean, there's like the negative way to look at it, like, oh, I suck, I'm not smart enough, I'm not this, I'm not that. Or you can start looking at like, okay, well, what variables caused my defeat? I actually think that's something too that people should start looking at, like winning, because I think when you win, a lot of times you can kind of chalk it up to like, oh, all my hard work paid off. But at least for me, like near the end of my career, I started looking at my wins the same way I started looking at my losses. Like, okay, well, why did I win? Like, why was I superior to this guy? Was I faster than him? Was I stronger than him? What have you? But I like that when you're discussing this, especially like this trajectory of like maturity and like objective reality, you're like, okay, I lost, but I instead of talking about like, is this the sport for me or can I cut it? Your first inclination is like, what did we do wrong? How can we fix it? Oh, these are easily fixable mistakes. Let's get to work. And I think there's no coincidence that it's that mentality that then led you to a run that got you to the UFC.
Right.
Can you walk me through not just the story of it, but also kind of like the logistics? Like, when did Iridium come into the picture? When did you start getting the eye of the UFC or anything like that? Like, how does that stuff work? Because a lot of fighters will listen to this and they think like, beat everybody around me and then beat up, as many people as I need to beat up until I get the call. But it can't be that simple. There's got to be some sort of nuance to this.
There's 100% a underlying factor that if I could tell any young fighters out there it's that old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That is a big chunk of fighting. Obviously, you have to have the skill, but you have to have the right management team around you. You have to have the right coaches that are, that's why we have managers and coaches, because true fighters will fight anybody.
Yeah.
They truly think they can
For
win.
better or worse.
Right. And I think that was the biggest thing was the LFA for me with Patrick. Patrick had such a great relationship with Ed Suarez, who's the owner of the LFA, and that's where I got my in. I was 5-2 in the LFA, and I was 8-2 when I got signed to the UFC. But I was 5-2, had 5 finishes in the LFA, and the UFC needed a opponent for Austin Hubbard. It was like a Saturday night, and they called Ed because Ed manages guys as well, and
He's actually Anderson Silva's old manager.
Yep, and like Machida.
Yeah, all the guys from Brazil, more than, not all the guys from Brazil, but a lot of the big fighters from Brazil, forgive me.
And they called him needing someone, step in. I guess Ed didn't have anybody. Ed called Patrick. Like, hey, does Dakota want to fight in the UFC next weekend? And of course they call me, and I'm like, for sure, 100%.
Yeah, but the key word there is next. The two keyword next weekend. It's like, dude, that's a week's notice.
Saturday, I got the call on Saturday morning.
Oh,
and I had to weigh in on Friday. So
were you off a fight? Did you have just come off a fight, or were you possibly at camp for a fight? No, just fucking off the couch.
So
God bless.
Yeah, it was. That was the.
How heavy were you, if you don't mind me asking?
I was 186.4 when I stepped on the scale after they called.
So what was that cut like in a week? 30 pounds?
It
miserable.
Was, like Patrick says, he died a couple times. Like I was right there. Like, man, I remember sitting in the portable sauna at one point for like an hour and 15 minutes. Get out, I'm like, I had to lose a little bit of that. Lost 0.2. I'm like, dude, this is gonna be horrible. But the only thing that kept me from missing weight, and in my head, I'm like, I can miss weight. I took this on short notice.
If you're like 3 pounds over, they'll still pick the fight.
That's exactly what was in my head. I'm like, I can miss it if it comes down to it. Was Josh Sampo fighting and his debut and missing it by whatever Josh barely missed it by, would have got fight of the night.
They got fight of the night,
but
and then his whole bonus went to. But you want to know? Can I say something if you don't mind? Josh Sampo's response to that was, I think, golden. So Josh Sampo fights Ryan Benoit, and Ryan Benoit. Sorry, Josh Sampo missed weight for that, and then ends up winning the fight. It was a great fight, and it got fight of the night bonus. But because Josh didn't make weight, his $50,000 also went to Ryan Benoit. and they go to Josh and they go, how much does this suck? And Josh was talking about how Ryan was literally living out of his car when he got the call to the UFC. And Josh Sampo, this is funny that you bring that up because it's something I've never forgot. Josh Sampo goes, well, he really needed it. So in a weird way, it all worked out. Which I thought was like
Great guy.
How can you not like Sampo?
Right.
How can you not like that guy? Teacher, coach at Francis Howell. He's another person I want to get on this podcast because I think him and Alp, to be honest with you, but Josh as well. But that's funny that you bring that up because that is someone that I kind of like harken back to, especially local St. Louis guys like Alp, Josh, Tyron Woodley, of course, Jake Collier, Lance Benoit. There's a lot of guys in St. Louis who have been to the UFC before, but it's kind of any chance we get to talk about them is a good time on the podcast because I do feel like they deserve a lot more respect than they get.
That group, like that class, if you will, of them guys was like the true, in my opinion, like the true pioneers of St. Louis MMA.
I agree.
You know, Steve Berger and Mike and all them. We wouldn't have this without them as well.
Would you put Pat on there as well? Because I would.
100%.
Pat,
he's
Steve
on the Mount
Berger,
Rushmore with
Mike
them. Yep.
Rogers. If I'm forgetting somebody, I'm so sorry, but I think those are like the big three. Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. I don't know how many lives and how many fighters those guys have made, but it'd be enough to fill a pretty big room, man.
Right.
But forgive me. So you're cutting this weight, week's notice to get the UFC call thanks to Ed Soros and your connections with LFA. Did you make weight?
Yeah.
God bless.
100%. Never missed.
God bless.
Yep, made weight. I remember coming off the scale. Well, I remember checking at the hotel. I'm on weight, and I'm in the elevator going down. The UFC's going to shuttle us over, and I'm like hurting. I'm like laying down, and Patrick's like, come on, man. You got to fake it.
Yeah, put a mask on for 20 minutes.
Just fake it, man. I'm like, dude, this is me faking. Like, I can't.
No.
It was rough.
No, dude. I'm so sorry.
I got off the scale, and I didn't care. My opponent seen me. I went and laid down. I laid there for a good 2 hours. Just sipping, like.
And just.
It was rough. It took me a while to feel good. And what's crazy about that, the hardest cut I ever had, I felt amazing going into the fight.
Really?
I literally felt amazing. Like,
Wow.
cardio hit me. I remember first couple exchanges, I'm winning all the exchanges. I feel amazing. I'm like, this ain't so bad. This guy's not that good. I know I can beat this guy. I'm like, we're probably halfway through the round. I look at the UFC's got little clocks in the corners, like on the bottom
floor.
of the cage. Yeah. It says 4 minutes and 17 seconds left. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a long night.
But in my head, I was banging.
But our game plan, I still think it was perfect because I knew everyone knows that's a fighter. Oh, why don't you just stay in fight shape year round?
Oh, go fuck yourself.
I can stay in the gym training all year, but it's different than if you have a fight lined up. It is just 100% different.
Even the mental preparation for a fight. I often say that a 10-week camp, it's better for your brain just because you have nothing to focus on other than your opponent for 10 weeks. And I will also make a comment about people that say that every sport has a season and they have a season for a reason because physical bodies take damage. We get wear and tear, especially in this sport. And Evan Elder actually said it best. He's like, when you walk into a place, when your place of work is surrounded by people who train every day to do damage, and they're very highly efficient at hurting people and breaking bones and causing people to go unconscious, go figure, injuries are bound to happen, even if you are a trained fighter. So the amount of training that you would have to do to stay, in shape, I would also say that, like, if you're not necessarily taking the amount of time that you need for recovery, then you're just going to run the red for too long and you're going to burn out before you even hit 30.
That's you nailed it.
Your
man.
body will break.
It's literally impossible to be at that high, like you said, red line in your body for that.
I would
long.
have those people train at American Top Team for one day, like one
Right.
1 hour session, and they'd be like, okay, you got to do 2 more of those today. Go home, eat, take a nap, shower, and then go back for like the night class or something, and then do that 365.
Yep.
Then come back and tell me what it's like to stay in fight shape for year round. I would even make the point that, like, having that like week, 2 weeks, maybe even a month break post a fight is maybe the best thing for a fighter's mental, because then you're surrounded for the reasons, like you're reminded why you're doing all this. Like you're back with your family, you're back with your
Right.
friends, you're enjoying life, you got a little bit of cash in your pocket now. Like, oh, okay, this is why I went through hell. This is why I'm putting my body and my mind through this. You need to be reassured of this, or else you'll go crazy and your body will
100%.
break down.
That's where I'm at now. Like, I was in a training camp, it felt like, for 2 years straight. And after this last fight, I've trained twice, I think. You know, I'm still doing getting my steps in, sometimes going on runs, all this, but it's been nice, like, being out of that headspace of so hyper focused and just going through the same things
How does
all
your
the time.
body feel?
Amazing. I feel great. Like right now, it feels good. You know, being able to, check out of the gym for a little bit and get to do things that I really like and spend time with friends and family. But I'm starting to get that itch. Like I'm ready to get back to Florida. I'm ready to get back in the room.
I think that's the healthiest thing, though. It's like you want to come back now.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to
Right.
come back. You're itching for it. I got this competitive edge. I just got this win. Let's fucking go.
Yep.
I think that makes for the best possible mental space when you're going into another camp. Not that you're going into a camp, but like you're going to be training. There'll be guys in camps who need to peak at the right times, and you got to get them ready just like they helped get you ready. You're going to reciprocate now. That's what makes a good teammate. That's what makes a good team. I do want to briefly talk about, you had this fight in the UFC. Were you still with Pat at that time?
Yep.
When was it in your career that you started making the trips down to Florida and you started going down to ATT? Did you have a talk with Pat? What was that conversation like?
So
Because this is the guy that you came to and you trusted, and he's your mentor, now your father-in-law, and now you're telling him, hey, like, did you tell him I outgrew the gym? Did you tell him what was that conversation?
So we ran into that issue of just having bodies. We didn't have very many guys in the room.
Especially at the level that you now need.
Exactly. And I was coming up to, before I left, I was coming up to Mike's. I was going up there
St.
like
Charles.
a couple days a week. I was going there two days a week. And me and Patrick just sat down one night and he's like, if you want the success that you're dreaming of and that you think you are capable of, we need to find a better route. Like,
Oh, so he approached you.
yeah, we had conversations about it, and it was all like
God bless.
him saying, I've given you everything I can give you. There's things, of course, we can always work on when you're home, and things we can,
Nuance.
little things, that are very important, that you can dial in. But he's like, you need bodies. You need high-level training partners that are going to be there every single day for you. So that's when I was going to Mike's, like I said, here and there. And then it was hard there as well.
There's some detail I want to add to that, because I know how far St. Charles is from your house. So you're also driving, an hour and 15 minutes one way to go get that training. So it's not like it's down the road and you're just choosing,
Exactly.
oh, well, there's this other comparative gym real close by. No, now you're making a sacrifice. You're talking about 2 hours and a half of just commute a day
And when
to
you
train.
got a wife and kids and you're still working a full-time job. It's that's where your time's spent. And the best thing for us that we found in the area, we were like, all right, let's go to Glory. So I went up to Krause's gym.
Over in Kansas? Kansas City, sorry.
Yep. I was there for, I guess, about 2 years.
Did you run into Sean Woodson when he started training there as well? Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I've, here and there go to Wolves Den and train with Sean
Yeah,
while
because
I'm
you got
home.
the connection still, yeah.
And but I was at Krause's gym for around 2 years, and it was right after my first UFC fight. Started going there, and did a whole camp for this Chinese guy named Rong Zhu. I was supposed to fight, get all the way to Vegas, test positive for COVID, and I'm like, hey, can I take another one? How come none of my cornermen have it? We were all together all week, and blah blah blah. And they're like, no, you can't.
You think it was a false positive?
100%, because I went and got 2 of them the next day, and they were negative. And not saying, it's just really frustrating because you don't get many layups at the UFC level. That was a layup. Like I truly believe humbly that just stylistically he was 20 years old, like youngest guy on the roster at the time. Like he just wasn't ready for that type of fight, and that one slipped away. And then that was supposed to be in like September of 21.
If you don't mind me asking, and I'm not talking about like the monetary number, but was there still like, Did you at least get your show? Did you get anything?
No,
Nothing.
no show, but they did. They did.
Kind of took care of you on the back end.
Yeah,
Okay,
like
cool.
all the flights and forget how much money, but they did throw me some money.
Okay,
Yeah.
because that's also rough, man. This is
Right.
like, if we're talking about the height of COVID, and we can get into that, but 2 years, right?
Right.
Fuck me. Well, forgive me. I do want to kind of take a step back because you're talking about this UFC career, but I do want to take a step back when you started cross training. What is that culture shift? Because you were exclusively training with Pat. Now you're starting to go a little bit cross training with St. Charles, Wolves Den. You're going over to Glory. How is that feeling as like, because I think it doesn't get enough credit to be the guy who does cross training, right? Like oftentimes in martial arts, we always talk about like, hey man, go over there, go do this, go do that. But some things that are like kind of unsaid is there's this insecurity with some coaches that if you do cross training, you might find some place that you vibe with more and that you'll be lost. But I don't think that was necessarily a variable since Patrick was the one who was saying like, hey, listen, you're kind of outgrowing these. We don't have the bodies. We don't have the skill sets. Sorry, they have the knowledge, but the skilled bodies to work with you. So he's being like, hey, you're going to have to kind of go to these places to find this. Great. So that's not a factor. But then the other factor is now you're the outside guy and you had already fought in the UFC. So now, like when you're coming into the gym, did you ever feel like, you know, when you're coming into sparring, when you're coming into these like gyms to do some cross training, did you ever feel like any sort of hostility or that they were kind of putting the murderer's row in front of you to kind of, I don't want to say beat you.
Some gyms are like that. I do know that, like, you know, you get the fresh blood in the room. But like I said, I've always had a great relationship because of Patrick. Like he's always been super close with Mike and Steve, and my whole amateur career, even when I was training with Pat, we would, you know, go up to St. Charles every now and then and or to Steve's, and so I always had a good relationship with Mike and the guys at the gym. So even before I got signed to the UFC, I was up there a couple days a week, and me and Lucas have always been super close. Lucas Clay.
Oh, Lucas Clay, forgive me.
Yeah. Me and Lucas have always been super close.
So that's another guy who, forgive me, we were supposed to have him on the podcast yesterday, but there was like a scheduling conflict. But that's another guy I'm going to sit down and talk to because I think both of you guys are like some of the highest level athletes we've produced, and it's like a shame that you guys aren't in the UFC right now.
No, Lucas is.
Forgive me. You were speaking.
Yeah. Me and him have been a lot of training sessions were just me and him, and gotten a lot better because of him, and love that dude.
I'm sure he'll say the same.
Right. Then Elmar was training with him a lot at the time. He was coming down, like him and Lucas make little trips down, and but it was never. I never had anybody at St. Charles where I'm like, this guy's an asshole. Like, why is he trying to spar like that? And
anybody at Glory?
No, I remember going to Glory the first day I went there, and I went with Grant for the first time.
Dawson.
Yep.
Okay.
And it was just such an eye opener. And he was like the nicest, nerdy, like, oh man, you're really good, dude. You need to start coming here more. You're really good. I'm like, what do you mean? You just beat the shit out of me for 5 rounds. Like, wasn't even close. And
was he in the UFC at the time, or was he also coming? Okay, he was also in the UFC at the time.
Yeah, when I started, like, officially when I moved to Kansas City, there was probably, I think there was anywhere from like 15 to 20 of us that were in the UFC at the time, because Krause was still fighting, and like he was starting
also
to segue.
from a wide range of skill. I mean, you had like 25ers to I believe heavyweights all in the UFC. So like you probably could come in and find a UFC fighter at every weight class of MMA.
Women's even.
And the women's divisions
couple
as well.
girls in the UFC.
Megan Anderson, specifically the one that I know.
The 25ers were so deep at the time. You had like Jeff, Molina, Brandon Moreno was there.
That's right. Yeah, Brandon started training there as well. Yeah.
Tim Elliott.
What can I ask you? What happened to Jeff Molina?
Well, like I said, the whole
because of that.
Yeah, the whole,
James Krause.
Yeah.
The betting stuff.
Everybody always asks me, because everyone wants to know. Only thing I can speak on that is I'm the type of guy that shows up to the gym. I'm going to try to work harder than everyone, try to be a great partner for the guys in the room. If anyone needs help with something that I do well, I'll try to show you the little nuances makes me a little better at someone else maybe than doing it. And, I'm picking brains, same thing, but I'm just there to work hard and, get out.
Was that a shock to you, like when all that stuff started happening? Because you moved to Kansas City, so obviously there was something there that you were like, holy shit, like this is the place, right? So let's move the whole family over. And then that's a conversation to have with the wife. You're taking the kids. That's not like something that you would do lightly. It's not like you went in there for a sparring round and you're like, oh, the guys here are good. Let's move the whole family. So when that happened, I mean...
That's what I tell everyone. Even if I did know something...
No, forgive me. Let me ask the question a little better. When that happened, because to be honest with you, Dakota, I don't want to go down that road.
Right.
I don't care. There's a lawsuit. They'll figure that shit out. You know what I mean? My concern here is not James Krause and what he did. My concern is you. You went to this gym. You're having the time of your life. You're getting the training that you want. It's kind of like all cylinders firing. Then this thing happens. What does day 2 look like for you? Like, holy shit, what are we going to do? Like
that was hard. I had to, call an audible. It was...
How long had you moved there and been training there before that happened? So, like, how much time had elapsed?
A good year
and a half. So you guys were kind of rooted in.
And still to this day, like, there's so many things that I use in my game that came from James Krause. Like, that man, I love the man. He played a huge role in my life. Like, he really did. Like, I owe a lot of my success to that man. And nothing he did or didn't do would ever change that. So, but after all that went down, and I had to figure out, all right, what's the next move? Because I'm going to figure this thing out. And thank God for my wife, because people don't realize, like, they think, oh, you're a professional fighter. You must be rich. You're bringing in the bank, It's not like that. And it's very stressful on, my wife and my 2 kids. And just to have her backing and like, all right, no, we're going to figure this out. Let's see what we got to do. And that just shows how much she believes in me, and that's my biggest driving factor. Before I walk out to the cage every time, I'm like, it's not for me, it's for them. Like, it is for me, I want to fight for myself, but I ain't letting them down in the aspect of the sacrifices that they made. So we get on the phone. Grant had already left to go to Florida. He moved to American Top Team, 4 or 5 months before this all happened. So this is all going down. Grant gives me a call. Hey, come to Florida. Come check it out. And I'm like, dude, I don't know about that. I don't think I can make my wife move again across the country. And
not just that, but like economically speaking, I mean, Kansas City, there's a certain cost of living associated with the Rust Belt, even if you're in the city, like living in St. Louis or Kansas City and living in New York or Coconut Creek, or you're talking about a completely different line of cost of living.
Oh, it's unbelievable. And so I get a call from Grant. I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll check it out. Didn't know what to do, kind of. I'm like, I'll figure it out. I just don't know what.
Was there any part of you thought about moving back to St. Louis?
Well, we did. We did come back home.
Forgive me. Sorry.
Yeah, we ended up moving. I should have stated that, but we moved back home, and I was training with Pat again, and Lucas, all these guys come down trying to figure it out, and like a couple guys up in Kansas City, like Trey Ogden, he had his gym at the time, and everyone started going there, and I'm like, do I stay there and train with Trey? Do I do this? And I'm just trying to figure out what's best for me, and then Thanksgiving rolls around a couple years ago, and waking up, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go for a run, be responsible so I can eat a little more and not feel as guilty. Get up and doing the old quad stretch, pull your leg up. And my knee that I've always had meniscus issues with just locked up, and it always would do that. And I could always like work it out. I sat there for like an hour in the bed trying to get it, and I told my wife, I'm like, hey, I think it's done now. So knee stuck at 90 degrees completely for a week straight. Go in to the doctor, get the surgery the next day. They cut my meniscus completely out. And then 2 weeks later, I get a call. And not even, maybe 2 days later. 'Cause I remember it was fresh off surgery. And they're like, hey, do you want to do the Ultimate Fighter? And this is December, maybe when they call me, December 7th. I got to be there by January. And I'm like, yeah. So I looked up what high-level wrestlers, fighters have had their meniscus cut out. And Kyle Snyder popped up. Same exact surgery, same exact tear. What he did was doing the same rehab he did. Getting up every 2 hours in the middle of the night, setting an alarm, doing the stretches with bands.
Wow, I would have never thought about doing that. Googling similar fighters and
Right.
similar injuries to dissect the proper remedies in a short amount of time. That's crazy. I would have never thought about that. That's
Yeah.
actually kind of low-key genius.
And seen Kyle
'Cause I would have just
Snyder-
called the doctor. I would have been like,
Right.
hey, like, I've got this thing. What do you think?
Well, they were telling me, all right, it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I can't have that because I'm getting on the
Got
show.
shit to do.
And I seen Kyle Snyder did it in 14 days, like 100% rehabbed in 14 days. I'm like, if he can do it, I can do it. I know I can.
How intense was the surgery? I mean, obviously they got to cut you open.
So it's just 2 little incisions. It was, what's that, laparoscopic, I believe they call it.
Okay.
2 little tiny incisions. They go in with like a scope, however they cut it out.
All right, so it's not as intensive as like an ACL or MCL.
Right.
Okay.
No, you truly don't need your meniscus. It's just the padding between your knee joint.
What
here.
a fighter comment. You don't really need this
Right.
fucking... Let's get it out of our body.
You can function without it. Like I said, I don't have one in my left knee at all.
God bless, brother.
And it's just later on in life, I'm going to suffer from it because the arthritis, the bone grinding, all that's going to play.
20
factor.
years,
But
we'll be bionic anyway.
That's what my thought was. And
Oh, we're fucking meatheads.
so I look it up. I'm like, I'm going to do this rehab on my own. I'm back on the mats in 13 days. Like,
Jesus.
good to go. Go into the doctor, had the follow-up visit, and she's like, so we're going to start your rehab? I'm like, I don't need it. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm 100%. She's like, well, let's see. Do a squat. And I'm squatting, pulling my legs. She's like, wow, what did you do? And I told her I looked this up and did what Kyle Snyder did, and it worked. So fly to Florida after, getting to where I'm functionable again. And I'm there for 4 weeks and do a whole camp there, like right out the gate, Grant,
For the Ultimate Fighter, you're there for 4 weeks?
in Florida. Because
Oh, forgive me. You went to Florida,
Yes,
not
'cause-
to the Ultimate Fighter. Sorry.
yes, they called me, hey, you want to be on Ultimate Fighter, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes. Go down to Florida, start training, do a camp there to get ready, do all the interviews and all this, get flown out to Vegas, and get there on a Tuesday, I believe, and they're basically saying, hey, you won't be going to the house until Thursday, so a couple days.
Oh, you guys didn't even have to fight to get on.
No.
Because I remember when Ashley Cummins was on, she had to do a fight to get on. I believe also Andrew Sanchez had to do the same thing.
Yep.
So
Fought
that's-
Phil Hawes.
Yeah, and then beat his ass. But
Yep.
then he got into the house. That's interesting. I didn't know that part.
And start whatever, drop me off at the hotel. They have your own, key card. You can't go anywhere. It's lockdown. It's reality TV, so they don't want nothing.
Did you have to
slipping out?
give them your phone?
All that. Well, they let me keep it until they were like, all right, you guys are going. Come get your clothes with all your logos and all that crap. But there was a delay. We're supposed to leave Thursday. They come, they call us, whatever they do, come in the room. And they're like, hey, we're going to be at the hotel another week. And we're like, what the hell? And it's because Connor was delaying the process and whatever. Wasn't ready to come over. And end up finding out there. I didn't know any of this while I was there. I heard Lucas was there, so I was like excited,
Yeah,
gonna
you and
see
Lucas Clay were
Lucas.
both going to be on the Ultimate
I'm
Fighter.
like, oh, this is cool. Lucas, there's someone I know in the house. I don't want to have to fight him.
But you didn't see him beforehand. Okay, so like you just knew that he was going to be on the Ultimate Fighter. You knew you were on the Ultimate Fighter, and you were looking forward to eventually being on the show.
And never, like I said, never even ran at each other. We're in the same hotel, but you're in your room. They gave you an hour or so to go work out, do what you need to do, keep your weight
in
down.
isolation. I'm guessing it's not just everybody together.
Nope. And yeah, because you had to call to schedule. They had
When you would go work out by yourself, they didn't have like.
I got meds held for me one day
That's
in
interesting.
2 weeks. Yeah,
Who held notes? Some UFC guy.
I don't even know who he was.
God bless that guy.
Right?
Thank you, dude.
He wasn't bad. I'll give
For,
him that.
yeah, for an hour free,
Right.
session.
So they're like, we're gonna be here another week, and I didn't even realize until like doing medicals and stuff over there. I'm like, I run into Austin Hubbard, who I made my UFC debut against, And that literally just lit a fire into me. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, if this dude's on the show, I got a chance to get this one back, but on a full camp and, ready to go. I don't care if I win the show. I want to fight that dude again. And that's when I found out. I'm like, why are there so many? I see Jason Knight, him, Kurt Hollaball, a couple other vets. I'm like, the hell, what's going on? And then I find out while I'm there, they're doing like UFC vets versus like prospects, like up and comers.
That's the basis of the show,
Right.
meaning that they're bringing back a bunch of guys that were in the UFC to face a bunch of guys that have never been in the UFC.
Correct. And so do all the medicals, all that stuff. They call me. So it was the following Wednesday. They're like, hey, be ready to go to the house tomorrow morning. I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. All my stuff will be ready. Be ready at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. rolls around, and the head producer comes in and is like, hey, there's been a change of plans. In my head, I'm like, now we got to wait again, even longer.
Or we have to fight to get in the house? Like, what do you
Well,
mean?
that was even fine with me,
Yeah.
And then he's like, hey, you're an alternate now. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, I don't know what happened. This is just come from higher up than me. That's all he told me. Came from higher up than me. And I'm like, so what's that mean? And he's like, well, you can stay here in case someone gets hurt in the next 2 weeks or whatever. Then you can step in. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll do that.
Serious?
I don't know. And then
Did they say that you were an alternate or the alternate?
the alternate for, I'm assuming, like the vets,
Got
the
you.
UFC vet side.
Got you.
The prospect side, I don't know, who they had for that.
But that's key to point out because it's like, from what I know, Lucas Clay also got benched, and he hadn't been in the UFC, so it's entirely possible that
Right.
he was then the alternate
Right.
for the newer guys.
Right. And like I said, I never really, I was so frustrated, and I was like, man, what the hell? Then
No
called my-
negotiations. This is like,
Yep, this is what it is.
do you want to wait? You can leave if you want. We're not keeping you, but this is happening.
And I stayed a
So
day.
there is. Let me ask you one question before you continue. Was there not like some sort of contract signed with the Ultimate Fighter?
There was a bunch of, like
Legal documents.
all the licensing and the release forms and all that went into it, but
I'm sure they reserve the right to do whatever the fuck they want whenever the fuck they want
100%.
to.
Yeah, they know they're fine oil machine. So
Yeah.
then I call my manager. I'm like, hey, this is what's going on. He's
And
like,
at the time you were with Iridium?
yep.
Okay, sorry.
Call Jason up. He comes and picks me up because I'm like, well, if I'm not on the show, I'm not just hanging out here and sitting in isolation no more. He came pick me up. We went and got some lunch, talked about what's going on.
Yeah, what did Jason say? Was
He was like,
obviously he's not in the loop.
he was like, last thing I heard was you were good, last thing I heard from it. So whatever happened, it
Well,
sucked,
I mean, let me kind of illustrate what possibly happened. The way it's known to the public is Connor came in, and the way Connor negotiated was to get some of his guys like Brad Katona back on to get back into the UFC, and like that was kind of like a stipulation he had where he was basically like, I'm only doing this if it's going to benefit some of my guys. And I think it was one of those things where the UFC had already linked to the foundation who they were going to pick, how they were going to get the fighters, whatever. In comes the X variable of Connor, and then he's got his own demands. And I guess he was so valuable enough that they listened to him, brought in some guys,
right.
took out some guys, and a lot of times when fans hear things happen, they kind of disassociate themselves. And the reason I like this conversation so much and why I wanted to talk to you so badly was, I mean, a plethora of reasons, but this is one of them. How much did that fuck with you, dude? How much did that fuck with your money, your training camps, any prospective fights that you had lined up? Because, like, let's say you had a fight lined up with LFA. You cancel that
Right.
because you're going to go to the Ultimate Fighter, so there goes money. You're not working or whatever it is that you're doing. You're not training. You're not there for the team members. You're not there for anything. You're there for in isolation, only to then to be told, hey, go fuck yourself, kid. Go back. Now you're sitting here like, okay, like I got cut. I got treated like chopped liver. I mean, I want to be careful how I ask this question, but like, do you blame the UFC? Do you blame Conor McGregor? Do you blame, like, where's your head? Or are you like, you know what, Arion, fuck it. I don't care.
That's really where I'm at. I'm mature enough now. Like younger, if I was even a couple years, a year younger than that, I would have been pointing fingers. But in my head, is what I was thinking at the time was like this. That's not gonna get you where you want to go.
Mm.
All I can do is speculate on what happened. Connor may not have done any of that. I don't know. I don't know if it was me. He got we don't want Dakota. He could beat this guy of mine. Let's pull him out and put this guy. I have no idea what happened there. All I know is what I was there for to do, and it didn't happen. And that was after I'm 2-0 after getting cut from the UFC at the time. So I'm 10-4 at the time.
Let's do a service to this conversation and let's take a step back. But I do want to end this portion of it, and that is, where is your head at? Because I want to keep this chronological because you have a grand tale to tell, right? And I want to do it justice, but I also want to kind of make it easy for everybody to follow,
Right.
people that might not necessarily know who you are or might not have followed your career as closely. But let's end this. Like, you're told that you're an alternate. You have this lunch with Jason. What was said? What was the trajectory? What was the plan?
Basically, is the same route we're on now. Just keep winning fights. They know who you are. They've asked about you a couple times. I had a fight pop up previous to that. They called me on like a Thursday morning and asked if I could make 55 the next day to fight Jim Miller. And I'm like, tell them to fight me at 70. I'm there. I'm 100%, but I can't make 55.
24 hours notice is
It's not
stretch.
Ain't a 55er on the planet making it.
That's
if they're
crazy
not
that Jim
ready.
Miller wouldn't accept knowing that you were requesting this, because any fighter, when a fighter hears this, the immediate reaction is, this guy's coming off the couch.
Right.
So he's going to do me a service by saving the fight if I do him a service of expecting him to, like, hey, I'd fight you at 55 if I was given enough time. But I'm not given enough time.
And I doubt that was even relayed to him. It was just probably, hey, Dakota can't make 55, and they moved on to the next guy.
Yeah, and that's a very mature way to look at it, because, like, I think you are correct. I don't think there's any
Right.
nuance in these conversations.
No.
Like, all right, this guy's out, but we got this other guy.
Yep. And they're just looking for someone to
Who can
step
fill the
in.
spot.
Yep. No questions asked. Can you do it? Can you make weight? If so, here's your ticket.
But you were willing to say yes. It's just like, hey, I don't
right.
want to.
And I knew that. I'm like, hey, I'm not gonna make 55, but if they will do 70, I'm there.
open.
And so that was in my head too, and Jason's like, yeah, we just keep winning fights and the call is going to come. It may not be when you want it to, earlier, later, whatever it might be. And that's just the conversation, just keep doing what you're doing. If you want this, just stay steadfast and just keep your head down and stay on. And I haven't wavered, man. I truly haven't. I'm super confident in my skill level right now. I know without a doubt, because the guys I train with, man, in the top 15 at 155, we got 5 of them at the gym.
Jesus.
And dude, I do very well with every single one of
You
them.
train with them every day.
And my confidence is through the roof, and it's just let me get my chance, and that's all I'm waiting on.
Let's take a step back to that first foray into the UFC. You take the fight on a week's notice. The first time out didn't go your way. Things led to how they led to you resulting in being cut. Dissect that for me when you found out that information. And by the way, this is going to be kind of like the part of the conversation where, for those that don't know, I didn't send Dakota a list of questions that I was going to ask. I just told him the hierarchy or like the overall topics in which I wanted to discuss. Right. And I told you that I was like, you don't have to talk about anything you don't want to or divulge anything you don't want to, but however transparent you want to be. So when I ask these next couple of questions, I just want to really, really reiterate that, like, you don't have to fucking tell me anything you don't want to.
If anything that this will do is help a younger, fighter that may end up being the same, situation, or maybe they know what to do to avoid that,
Yeah.
But
so what were the emotions? How did you find out, and what were the emotions?
So first fight, lose a decision 29-28 across the board.
You took on a week's notice.
Just no tank, whatever. That was me. That was it was a free fight to me. You know, I'm supposed to lose. I'm going in here, but in my head, I'm like, I'm winning this fight. I don't care what anyone says. I'm going to go in there, try to get the finish. Lost, whatever. Next fight, get the camp for it. No excuses. My head, fighting whatever, how many world time kickboxer this guy, Russian was. And doing super well on the feet. Great exchanges, doing well. Rock him a couple times.
It was a great fight.
And catches me with a liver shot. And the worst thing, I think that was harder than being cut for me, honestly, was out of all my fights, I've had 32 fights now. And I've been finished one time, and that was it. And that was the hardest pill for me to swallow, like, more than anything, was being finished. But that's part of the game, you know.
I know exactly how you feel. Trust me.
It was so hard for me to eat that. Like,
he caught me.
Yep. And knowing, like, I was winning in my eyes.
You were hanging, you were in there, and then before you knew it.
And then looking back on it now, I'm like, oh, I made so many bad decisions, and you know
what also sucks about, like, body shots? You'll get some fringe community that's like, oh, just fucking eat it, man. They don't even know what they don't know.
Did it just hurt? Yep, that was it.
It just hurt so bad.
I'm a pussy.
It's not like my fucking endocrine system just shut down.
But sitting in the back, and then I remember after losing the fight, you know, go up to the hotel room, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, God. In my head, I'm like, I'm just lost 2 in a row, praying I don't get cut. Like,
that soon already?
Yeah, in my head. It was in my head. I'm like, man, I pray to God I don't get cut.
It wasn't a discussion that you had beforehand? Like, it wasn't like someone told you, like, you need to win this? It
was
just all internal?
Nope. Yeah, it was just that, you know, I always seen, you know, if you lose 2 in a row, you're on the chopping block. But I thought in my head, maybe I took the first fight, short notice. You saved the fight. So that's in my head. I'm like, man, praying that. And then I get a call from TJ Brown. He's like, hey, man, what are you doing?
Forgive me, who is TJ Brown?
TJ Brown. He was a 45er in the UFC. Trained with me at Glory. Went down and trained with him and Bryce Mitchell down in Arkansas a handful of times.
The only reason I ask is whenever we say names, people might not
Forgive
know.
me, yeah.
No,
I feel like everyone knows who I know.
I know who TJ is, and I could have probably said it, to be honest with you. I just didn't know what he was to you. I didn't know if he was like a friend.
Super close with TJ as well. He fought on that card that night. And he's like, hey, man, what are you doing? I'm like, just sitting there. He's like, dude, come hang out. Like, don't just sit there and you're going to kill yourself just sitting in there by yourself. You're just going to. Thoughts. So TJ's like, come down, come hang out. So I went down to TJ's room, me, him, and Bryce Mitchell just hanging out, smoking, you know, just shooting the shit. And it was good. Like, it was good for me to get out of that. And
shout out TJ Brown, man.
Right, no, good dude.
Exactly what you needed.
Love the dude. Then I think it was maybe 2 weeks after the fight, 2-3 weeks, and I got the call from Jason saying, hey, man, I hate to do this, but you're cut. And
did Jason say anything to you after the fight?
After the fight.
So, like, between getting the news and right after the fight. Like,
he was very, like, he's like, it could happen, but I think we're safe.
Got you.
So
he didn't feed you any sort of like delusion.
No, he's like, I'm not telling you because I don't know. And he calls me. I remember where I was at. It was like super like a snowstorm, and like all the roads were shut down. All my buddies came over to my house. One buddy had a snowmobile.
You're in Missouri.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
in Missouri. This doesn't sound like Florida.
Right. In Missouri at the time. And we were going to the store to grab something to cook, and there's a handful of in my buddy's truck, and he called me, and I remember first he called me, I was like, oh, it's fight news, you know?
Oh, I got another fight.
And then he's like, hey, man, I got bad news. And I'm like, God, dang it. And then he's like, well, this is what we can do, you know, what are you thinking? And I'm like, well, this is what I want to do, man. And
meaning, do you want to stop fighting?
Yeah, he never inclined on that. He's like, just what do you want to do? Like, do you want to...
What's the next steps? Do you want to stay with me? Do you want to get new management?
Right.
Do you want to...
And Sean was, you know, telling Jason, like, hey...
Sean Shelby, the matchmaker for the UFC.
Correct.
Forgive me.
No, you're good. That's my fault. And he's like, tell Dakota, you know, just win some fights. We'll bring him back when the opportunity arises.
Did you ever have... This is something I wanted to ask Sean Woodson, and I forgot to ask... What was your relationship like with anybody in the UFC? Did you ever get to talk to any of the matchmakers, or was Jason House basically the middleman between you and the UFC brass.
Yeah, 100%.
Gotcha.
And that's like, if you were at like any small town promotion, like everybody, it's close. You know the promoters, the
Sometimes the promoter is the matchmaker, and you're talking to them.
100%. The doctors, everybody. And it's like that in the UFC. I feel like if you're there, they see so many people come and go.
But it's corporate America meets the fight business.
100%.
I will say this: I've never seen a promotion do it as efficiently and as well as the UFC. From setup to production to post, they're the gold standard. No one's even close.
It's not going to change. No one can compete with them.
No, I actually agree with you.
And
especially if they start moving to like BJJ in boxing. If they do that,
monopolize it all.
It's genius. It's genius. There's some questions I want to ask you off the topic of your career specifically, and I'm going to caveat this because I don't want to interrupt you, but trust me, there's some thoughts there. But Jason calls you, tells you, "I'm sorry, kid. This is the lay of the land. What do you want to do?" Your response is, "I'm getting to the gym on Monday." What?
Yep. Yeah, basically it. I'm going to get to Florida, keep winning fights, and like I said, I can't express enough, and words don't do enough. My wife, like, the support I have there it's truly like there's times, you're like, man, I feel like a piece of crap, I quit my job, I'm training full time, and I'm not the sole provider right now, and it's hard to swallow as a man, like we're here on earth to provide.
What was oh man, I'm going to feel like an asshole asking this question. What was the jubilation like when you got the call for that week's notice fight? Like, honey, I'm finally here. And then contrast that to the conversation you and her had when it wasn't necessarily going your way. What was her reaction?
When we got the call, we were laying in bed, and I woke up in the morning, checked my phone, and I seen I had so many texts and missed calls, and I knew. I'm like, I know this. I call.
Everyone's congratulating you before you even know.
And see, it's all over everywhere, and she's crying, and so many emotions, just happy, like relief, like it finally paid off. To when I got cut, I don't really remember how she reacted when I told her I got cut, because I feel like I was kind of checked out at the moment, like
surreal, out of body.
Like, yeah, I was like just not there. So I really don't remember her reaction to it. But she's been so amazing and just behind me. And
do you pick the right one?
It's
easy for a woman to stand behind her man when times are fine, or it's even easy for, I know women that like, I gotta be very careful how I say this. I think it's very difficult to be a woman, especially to choose a man, right? Because then you're putting a lot of responsibility on their shoulders onto your life. Right. But a lot of women kind of know, like, this guy's going to be a law, he's going to school for law, he's going to be a doctor, he's going to be this. You can kind of see and pick and choose. But to pick a fighter, that's a roll of the dice, right?
And what's, like I said, crazy, her dad, she's been around the fight game. So she knows the time, the stress, just the whole game that entails that. People will only see the 15 minutes in the cage. They don't see the whole life outside of it. And I would be lying if I said the fight game and this career hasn't put a toll, like, on my marriage, my kids. Like, I've missed so much stuff with my kids and my wife, and she's always there to remind me, like, hey, this is why we're doing it. This is why we're in Florida. Like, we moved our whole family here.
God bless.
For you to, be able to chase this. And she just knows what kind of person I am. Like, if I don't go 100% and leave, anything left on the table, she knows that I won't be able to sleep at night. If I just packed it up right now, I'm like, I'm not going to get re-signed. 6-fight win streak, whatever. That every single day would haunt me. And it's, like I said, her and Grant Dawson as well. He's always so supportive, and he's always like, dude, you are UFC level talent, and not just talent, you're top 15 talent. You can compete with the best in the world. You do it every day, and he's so supportive, and it's good to have, like, you got to have those people.
You guys seem close when I see you guys at NFA and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Is there any part of you that thinks you wouldn't be on this path if you didn't have your wife?
It'd be a lot different, man.
Yeah.
It might be some self-destructive, like, drinking maybe, and that's another thing. I don't drink like I used to.
Well, forgive me.
No, I drink.
Oh, okay,
Not
okay.
not like I used to. Like I used to, I could drink every weekend. Like now I'll drink a couple times a year. Like I've drank more this past since my fight. Since
You win a fight, bottles
Right,
start popping.
right. And usually I'm like a couple beers after the fight and I'm
No,
done.
but everyone wants to be with the champ, right? So
Right.
everyone wants to like, hey, let me get you one. Before you know it, one turns to 12.
Right. And so it's just I don't know. I don't know where it would be. It's you could always say you could do this or that, but it wouldn't be I wouldn't be the man I am without it, that's for sure.
I agree with you. I have a wife, and I can concur with that thought that I would not be where I'm at, who I am without her. So I just don't think that this is gonna sound very like weird, but like I like when we take the moment to give the people around us credit, specifically our partners, because I know for a fact my wife had to. She deserves every single one of my wins just as much as I do. So I'm sure
That's
we feel
how I feel,
very much the
100%.
same.
And it's like I said, I tell everyone that I sacrifice so much for the sport, but she sacrifices just not much, if not more, you know.
I think that's a humble and a good way to look at it, especially as like a partner and everything. And then, however this life pans out, however, the path before us is laid. At the very least, you have the knowledge that you picked a good one.
Oh yeah, it's
God bless.
I couldn't do it. There's
Good
no
job,
way.
Pat. You raised
Yep.
a good daughter.
Yep.
So, okay, forgive me. Let's go back to the story. You get this call. Jason's like, what do you want to do? And you're like, we're going to work on Monday, right? You have the conversation with those around you. Is there anything before I move on from this point of the story that you want to say or
You
divulge?
know, said I found out I'm cut, and then I sit on the bench for a year.
What
Like,
does that mean, sit on the
like
bench?
no fights.
Oh, okay.
Like can't get a fight anywhere. Like
Well, dude, because now you're the ex-UFC guy. So a bunch of guys that are trying to get to the UFC don't want to fucking fight you. Because you're like, oh, no, fuck that. Like,
it was a very
or they'll say, like, I'll fight him in the UFC, but not out.
Exactly. And it was hard because, like I said, I was won two fights after being cut. I'm 10-4 at the time. And then Ultimate Fighter happened, no fight, whatever. Fight October. Fast forward all the way through that whole year, no fights. Go down to Florida, help Grant get ready for to fight Demir, and that was in like June or July. And then go back down again in like August, I forget. He had 2 fights come down to help him for his camps. And then I finally get a fight, and it's October, I'm fighting. I'm trying to think, looking back.
You're kind of going over this like nonchalantly. Does your family still live in Missouri at the
Yes,
time? And
yes.
you're going down to Florida
For training camps.
specifically to help Grant,
Yep.
your boy, get ready for his fights.
Yep.
I have a lot of friends, brother. There's not a lot of friends I would be willing to take weeks out of my life and away from my family for. So like, I think you're kind of underselling your relationship with this guy.
Yeah, we're like I said,
He
we're
might be more than just a good friend.
yeah, we're brothers, man.
God
And
bless.
so I went down for a couple camps, starting to, get in the room, and I'm like, it is so many high level guys. You're seeing Gamrot, Dustin, Moicano, so many legends that are in the room.
And the conversations are completely different. They're going from what does the UFC look like? I wonder what this is to I was talking to Dana the other night.
Yep, and I'm
Is it eye opening? Are you
It
like
is.
starstruck?
100% was, and do a couple camps there. Finally get a fight booked, and I fought Jordan Griffin, who's ex-UFC fighter. I think he had 4 fights in the UFC. Go down there, do a camp, and just realize how much I grew in that camp. And got there.
What was that interaction like? Did you talk to the coaches? Did you just talk to Grant? When you say I went down there to go to a camp, and forgive me because I want to add some nuance and detail to this. Did you talk to Grant? Did you reach out to ATT?
So
how does that work?
Grant got me my foot in the door by, hey, I got a guy, he's come down and train to help me with my camp. Is that cool? And Grant had good rapport there, so
Sure, buddy, whatever you want.
yep, he can come in. And then I kind of just, my work ethic, being respectful, always talking. I'm always talking to everybody in the gym, super respectful, helping anyone the way I can.
You built your own reputation.
Yep. And I just took care of the rest, and got in.
So that when you wanted to come down there and train,
Yep.
it was like, come on down, brother.
100%.
God bless. That's how it should be.
Right. That's what I told him. I got my foot in the door. I'll take care of the rest. I can do the rest. And had my first camp there. Fought an ex-UFC vet. Beat him super easily. Was easy fight. And looking from there, I'm like, hey, now what? Calling Jason. Just beat them. 3-fight win streak outside the UFC. Beat a UFC vet easily.
Can I ask what your mentality in camp was like for that fight before we move on, though? Because you're a UFC vet fighting another UFC vet. You just got cut. Are you thinking? I guess what I'm trying to ask Dakota in an obtuse way is like, are you doubting yourself? Are you like, no, let's fucking go, unleash me?
I was super excited for that fight, and that's a good part for me to hit on too. Is I was super excited. I knew I was better. I knew I was going to win the fight, but it's a fight. We know anything can happen. Right? And I'm on a 3-fight winning streak outside the UFC, but I'm on decisions. I'm fighting, not finishing guys, and I'm always finished a good chunk of finishes, but not a finish. So
is that important to you when you fight?
Yeah, I would love them, but
why specifically? Is it because this is a question I've always had? Is it because
that's what they want?
That's what I was gonna ask. Is it I as a fighter want to finish everybody, right? Like if I can get first round knockouts every fight, awesome. But I understand too that like the more you win, the harder these opponents get, and when you're facing other killers, suddenly finishes aren't as often or they don't come as easily, right? So it's like it's not something that you are obviously it's something that you would want, but if it doesn't happen, it's not like you're like, super that's a loss in my record, right?
Right.
But it's more specific than that. It's because you know that is what the UFC is looking for.
That's 100% it. And
how much of that paradigm, to your knowledge, your opinion, how much of getting signed is excitement versus consistency in winning?
I think right now
you need both, but what is that?
I think excitement is more important right now.
Really?
I truly believe that. And you have to have a good record. Obviously.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask, right? So, like, if it's 100% pie chart, give a percentage. Excitement, consistent winning. Like, if you're 4-2, but you have 100% finish rate, but you also got finished, I don't think you're getting signed.
No.
But if you're 6-0 and you have 100% decision rate, you're also not getting signed.
Right.
So like
I think the 4-2 guy would get signed over
before the
6-0.
Wow, that's interesting.
If he's like super exciting, we're like starching dudes.
Yeah.
I really think that's important.
That's interesting to understand because I've talked to so many fighters and everyone that hasn't been signed to the UFC is always saying, I need to win.
And that's not wrong either.
Yeah.
That's not wrong either. Neither answer is wrong. But I just think there's an emphasis on finishing. That's how I got signed. I had a 57-second head kick knockout in the LFA, and that's the fight that got me signed. Before every fight, me and Grant.
Do you also think that a reason you didn't get the third fight in the UFC is because you got finished in that last one? Like if that fight would have gone to a decision, and let's just say for argument's sake that you still lost the decision. So you're 0-2 in the UFC, 2 decisions. Do you think you would have gotten a third fight, or do you think you still would have gotten cut?
I'm not sure. I honestly don't know. I don't know if that would have made a difference or not.
Okay.
I could speculate all I want, but I really don't know.
No, okay, that's fair.
Right.
But forgive me. So you just fought this UFC vet, hungry for the fight, got into American Top Team down in Florida, thanks to Grant bringing you in for his camps. You built a reputation and a repertoire with the staff and the coaches and everybody there. Got a couple wins under your belt. I believe at this point in time, we're now within, 2.5 years from the present time, right? When was it that you got with Brad, Carey, and NFA to, because like you've been like basically spearheading a lot of their shows recently. Right. Did they reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? Because I'm sure it is incredibly difficult to find fights.
It is. And that's the problem we were having. Like no one to fight. Literally, I couldn't tell you how many UFC vets.
You're a tough guy to say yes to, man.
Like guys that's like, hey, you're a UFC vet, but you're probably not getting re-signed. But, like they have nothing to lose, really, turning down the fights. I'm not kidding you. Joe Wooster, he's was a part of Glory, like
When
owner.
you say you have nothing to lose, you're talking about for the guys saying no.
Yes.
Okay.
Like you're probably not going to get re-signed to the UFC, like being honest, like you're a little older or whatever it may be. We went through 90 something guys saying no. No bullshit. And it was getting super frustrating. That's why I was on the bench for a year. Like we couldn't get fights, and finally get one. Then fast forward, like I said, Patrick gets a hold of Brad, like, hey, whatever we got to do. Like,
So Patrick reached out to Brad Carey and said, "Listen, we got
whatever we got to do."
fight.
And I even told him, hey, dude, I don't care about my purse. I don't care what we got to do to make it happen, to bring guys in. Let's make it happen. And every fight I've had with them, someone's pulled out. Like, I'm having to get replacements, and that's super frustrating. And they're doing an amazing job at getting replacements. I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it.
I talked to Lance and I talked to Marlene about it, and I can attest that I know that Lance the Clue is the matchmaker there, but Marlene also helps with a lot of it. And I'll tell you what, man, they're just good. They're good together, and they seem to make things work out. I've seen guys pull out a day before and they get a replacement for a professional. So it doesn't shock me, A, that it's hard to get you fights, B, that guys pull out after they accept, and C, that it's tough to get a replacement, but they somehow do. God bless on all accounts.
Oh, I was so grateful, man. I needed those, and they pulled through.
How much does that relationship with NFA now mean to you, knowing that you've had how many fights now? Three
with them.
Three,
yeah.
and 3 wins, right? What was like, Pat talks to Brad Carey, says, hey, we got to get Dakota Bush a fight. We cannot get him a fight. They get you a fight, get you 3 fights. How has your relationship with them shifted over the course of time? Because now you have a promotion that you're kind of like, I want to be careful the words I use here, but you have a good relationship with, and they are invested in you. They're obviously not giving you easy fights, because I don't believe there are easy fights to give you. And I believe the easiest fight you had was probably like 4 years ago, right? So it's like at this point you're fighting killers or ex-killers or up-and-coming killers. You know what I mean?
That's the biggest thing and I preach that to the younger guys and it's weird. Like to me, I feel like I'm a young guy still, like 30 years old.
You are mature and wise for your age.
Like when I'm in the room and I look around, I see these guys, down at the gym that are in their early 20s to mid 20s, and they kind of, you can tell when someone like is following you around. They attach to you because they're
looking for a mentor.
Right.
Pat was yours. Now you're becoming someone's mentor.
And some of them young guys, I try to preach to them like the quality of your opponents matters so much. And I say you can look at my Tapology, and there's not one guy on there that I fought with a losing record as a professional. I've never fought anybody with a losing record. And I've always fought, I'm looking for the best guys. I want quality wins. I want to test myself, and I truly think, like mentally, these past 2 fights, mentally, before the fight, in the fight, walking out, I got something's clicking, something's working right, figured out mentally for me.
Yeah, man, you've looked
and
good.
I feel amazing, and it's a testament to the gym and the room that I'm in and the guys I train with, and that's the biggest thing I can tell guys is don't shy away from, and you gotta know when to take them. It ain't, oh, you're 3-0, go fight a 12-0 guy. It's the right navigation. You got to have the right people around you.
Do you think that's the job of management, though?
Management and coaches. There's got to be a good relationship between management and coaches as well. And there's just so much more into this game than people realize than just going out there and knocking somebody out. There's so much more than that. And
can we talk about that briefly? Because like when you first start, you're training in your garage or your basement, right? Then over the course of a career, amateur career, you build a relationship with a coach. And that coach just so happened to be the promoter of a local promotion. So you got lucky in that.
Right.
But for me, to kind of try to Venn diagram our careers, I had a good reputation with my coach, and he had a great relationship with the promoter, Jim Jenkins. So I, by proxy, benefited from that. I had a promoter that would get me into fights, and I had a coach that was looking after me. And you had a coach who was also a promoter that could help you with both. Right. As your career progresses, you also find yourself in, you know, relationships with many coaches and you're cross training, and you find a relationship with many promoters because you're going on different promotions. How important was that paradigm of like management, promoters, and coach? So there's three circles in this Venn diagram. How important is it that like the managers are resonating with the coaches, the managers are in connection with the promoters, and the coaches understand the promotions? I mean, this is now getting to a business, right? It's the business of fighting,
It is.
and you are the fighter, but it's still a business. When was it that clicked? Like, okay, it's not as simple as just training and winning fights. There's a little bit of politics, a little bit of bureaucracy. There's a little bit of nuance to this.
I always realized that from Patrick. He always told me like, "Hey, I got the route for us. I got the roads paved. You just got to stay on it and trust me. You just got to trust me." And through, you know, all his relationships that he has, I learned so much by just watching and helping out with shows, you know, helping with Cage Champs, you know, setting up shows for him, doing what I could in those aspects, and learning that, you know, there's so much more than, like you said, than just fighting now, and you have to know, you have to have the right people in place to, like you said, you have to have, it's got to be such a perfect, like you said, Venn diagram. It's got to be such a all synchronized together.
Everyone's got to be on the same page. Everyone's got to be on the same team.
And
if you're trying to succeed,
and that's the biggest thing. And sure, you can get there if you're just a freak athlete fighter, because they're out there. There's the guys that go out there, they
gifted
just
by God,
knocking everybody out. They're 10-0. Those guys are gonna get signed. It's not like that for everybody, and it's different for everyone. So you got to learn.
We're also talking about the vast minority of high level fighters, which is the vast minority of people. You're talking about the 1% of the 1% of the 1%.
Right.
And if you're trying to like emulate that, have fun with that.
It was. This is just I think it was 0.00. It was 6 zeros. 0.6012% of the U.S. population will fight in the UFC.
That doesn't shock me.
And you look at it like that, and then I'm like, and I'm listening to this guy. Why are you throwing leg kicks? Those wouldn't hurt.
Oh my God!
It's such a crazy.
You know what sucks too though is, and I have no problem admitting this, I never listened to the critics ever until I remember when I suffered my first loss. It was always I always was astounded at the average man and their ability to harass someone in their lowest of times. When I lost to Demetrius Wilson and when I lost to Austin Bashi, I literally had people in my DMs calling me like a bitch. Oh, you suck. And I'm like, who are you, random guy who's never fought? Like, I get that you may have been rooting for your boy. Duly noted. Keep that to the comments. What are you doing DMing me? That was the wildest thing. Like, does it ever astonish you at the depravity of man when it comes to losses? Because in victory, you don't really feel it that much because it's inflow, right? You're like, oh, fuck yeah, I'm the champ. But in defeat, you're like, you get finished for the first time in your career, and then you get a bunch of guys like, oh, this guy's washed. You're like, motherfucker, this is my first finish loss.
I remember one specifically from that fight. A guy messaged me, you bitch, you pussy.
Oh my God.
I lost all my money betting on you, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, sorry, bro. I didn't lose any money tonight.
Oh, like half my fucking purse.
And, but I truly, it doesn't bother me, man. Like, when I was younger, it did.
It did.
But it's crazy what maturity does. Like, and I'm still not. My wife thinks I'm the most immature human on earth. So, but
well, she sees the real you.
I got it in a lot of aspects, but that stuff just never really bothered me because I'm like, I know 100%. Like the Paul Felder, you remember the tweet? The guy said something.
He was like, Paul Felder, you're washed up. He's like, you wouldn't say that to my face. And he's like, you're right, I wouldn't.
You're right. That's why I'm tweeting you.
Yes. And then Paul was like, fair enough.
So I look at it like that, and
what honesty on both ends.
Grant always says a thing. He's two things. He said that ring true. He said, women can't ever admit that they're a bad mother, and men can't admit that they can't fight. And that is so true.
That's rough, but honest.
You never see, for example, oh, if Albert Pujols came up to the plate, I'd strike him out every time. You never hear people talking in the NFL. And sure enough, there's the guys at the bar or whatever. Oh, if I wouldn't have blew my knee, that's going to have that. But every man thinks they can fight. You hear, and that's what's so hard for me because we're so engulfed in this.
Well, dude, there's a great population of men that see red when they get into conflict. And when you see red, I mean...
What happens? And
I've had to have those discussions like, stop, please, you're going to hurt yourself. Not with me, which is kind of funny. Can I ask you a question? How many altercations have you gotten into after you started training? Because for me, they disappeared. Like the second I started fighting, because I'm a smaller guy, I was a bantamweight, right? I walk around heavy, like 175 pounds. So I'm still lighter than you, right? And I don't get any interactions or altercations at all. But before, when I was in like school and fresh out of school, I guess because I was a smaller guy, they kind of happened more frequently.
Right.
I don't get any of that now. Maybe it's also because I'm just like more chill.
And probably your environment where you're at mostly. And
I don't really go to bars and stuff like
right.
that. More. Maybe I'm not setting myself up for failure.
Right.
Maybe that's the case. But I remember thinking like, oh, I'm going to train. And then when shit happens, I'm going to be the guy who like fucks people up. Spoiler warning, shit never happened.
Right. Trying to have the never back down scenes, beating up 3 guys out of, speaking of something like that. It's totally.
You know, Evan Elder said that's his favorite movie.
I believe it. I believe it.
I was like, God damn it, Evan. He's like, that's the best movie ever. I go, is it though?
They probably got him into fighting.
No, Evan trained. I think Evan trained. God, I gotta ask him now. I'm gonna message him later. Like, did Never Back Down get you in the gym?
I remember watching Evan because he's a couple years younger than me. I remember I was a fresh amateur. Evan was kickboxing on one of Patrick's shows. He wasn't old enough to fight MMA yet.
So it was like an exhibition child match.
And I remember hearing everybody, this kid's going to be a freaking animal. This kid's so good. He's talented. I remember watching him. I'm like, he's all right. I love
you
the
competitive
dude. Right.
bastard.
That's what it was. It was, no, look at me, not him.
I bet you if he was like 2 weight classes below or something like
Right.
that, you would be like, yeah, that guy's great.
That's amazing.
It's also that like, I did the same thing. Like if someone was even close to 135, I'd be like, yeah,
right.
But if someone was like 55, 70, 80, I'm like, dude, that guy's the best thing since sliced bread. I'd give them all the credit they deserve. Now that I'm kind of out of the game, I'm like, I've had a number of people tell me like, man, you're like a pretty cool guy. I was like, I've always been a pretty cool guy. The only difference was I was a fighter. So
Right.
like if you were anywhere near me, it was highly competitive.
That's how it is with the younger guys in the room. Like there's a couple of them that, I'm like, I'm not, it's not like a bad ego. Maybe it is the ego. But it's like I'm not
healthy ego.
It is, and I'm like I'm not losing, but I'm not gonna hurt. It's never gonna get out of hand. But it's like I ain't
How
losing
do I
to you yet.
teach with also letting you know
Right.
that I'm the motherfucker?
And there's a couple guys down there that are like that. My buddy Francis Marshall, he's a 45er in the UFC. Me and him train together a lot, and it's because I'm a weight class bigger. But it's that thing with him. It's like he's been so close to like getting me in submissions. Like, I mean, some of them are like, I'm like the walls are closing in.
It's going black.
And I find a way out of them. And he's just like, I can see he wants it, But it's a fun, healthy, it's super fun. And
I think that's where that saying of iron sharpens iron comes from. I think the average person thinks that when they hear iron sharpens iron, they think like, okay, you take a good guy and it'll get another guy good, and then like they can get each other even better. I think what that honestly means is when you get a person at a high level and you get another person at a high level, they'll achieve an even greater level. And they'll do it through conflict is a word synonymous with like negative connotations. Like, oh, there's a conflict there.
Right.
But I also think that you can have like respectful or admirable conflict. You're going into a gym with, how many guys on that mat could be in the UFC? How many of the guys, if one person shifts up a weight class, is now competitors with another person? Or, how many guys are maybe not in the UFC right now, but give them 4 or 5 years and they'll be in the UFC and a possible competitor. And you have to have enough ego to be like, I'm better than you and I'm willing to teach you, but also enough ego to stand your ground. And it is hard. I think this is kind of undersold. How hard is it to have, how many sparring matches have you had with that guy?
A lot.
A lot. And not once do you feel like you can let yourself up one time. You
Right.
don't want to give him, you could have 100 rounds with him where he doesn't catch you, he doesn't submit you, he doesn't do anything. But even if it gets close, that one time that it gets close, you're still willing to go to bat because you don't even want to give him one. I think that's healthy. I think that's
I
healthy
agree.
conflict.
And like I said, it might be my ego at some point in it.
course.
But I also look at the fact of like I love the dude, and I know that it's benefiting him.
Make him earn it too. You don't want to give him a tap that he didn't deserve. You would have never gotten this in a fight, and I don't want you to think that you would have. It's honesty, personified. I think ego is another word that kind of gets like this negative connotation. Oh, you're egotistical, you're all this. The ego can be healthy, a healthy amount of ego,
Right.
enough to get you into the door, enough to get you in there consistently to train and all that. I think that's why I love martial arts. It's masculinity personified, but not toxic.
Right.
Because when I think about myself, like, if you were to like close your eyes and envision like men, dude, it's the majority of the people that I train with, or the majority of my coaches, or the majority of like the older men that personify martial art. And I think it's fucking healthy. So like we were talking, you've had now the last 3 fights with NFA, and you yourself kind of described it as like one big camp. Can you describe that? Because you were talking about how you had this 1 year layover, like you just couldn't find fights. Contrast that to now you're like boom, 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 like one after another. What is that whiplash like of like, I can't find a fight, to now it's like we got fights lined up. You spent a year. The question I want to ask, Dakota, is when you're just training, you can really focus on working on skill sets.
Right.
But working on skill set is nice in theory until you want to apply them. Then you want to have a fight to like, okay, well, how does this work in a real experience, real environment? But the contrast of that can also be like, if you're only doing fights after fights, you're not necessarily getting a whole lot of that downtime to work on new technique, new skill sets. You don't have the time to really focus on like expanding that toolkit. You're just basically just trying to sharpen the tools you already
Right.
have. What was training like before those 3 consecutive fights, and then during those 3 consecutive fights?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, because when you have a fight lined up, like you said, you're not like, hey, let's maybe not this. He does well in those areas. Let's try to capitalize on this. So you're hyper
The
focused.
next 10 weeks, 12 weeks is on one individual. Where's he strong? Where's he weak? What are we going to do? Let's form the camp. Who are we going to put in to train with? This is a jiu-jitsu guy. We're going to do a whole lot more grappling this next 10 to 12 weeks than we do striking, or vice versa.
I think the biggest thing, and that's a part of the result of my last 2 fights, is just being in the gym 2-3 times a day, 6 days a week, and not hyper focusing on an opponent. Even though I have had opponents, I legit in my last 2 fights have not even watched a little film, obviously, but not like I used to, not hyper focused on them. I've been focusing on having my best performance, what I can do, my best, whatever tools I'm going to throw in, what am I drilling right now, I'm going to implement. And Patrick will tell you that, Mike Brown will tell you that. If I drill this, if we're drilling it, I'm doing it in the fight. I'm 100% going to do it in the fight. And I'm saying this humbly and respectfully, I'm not training to fight these guys. I'm training to fight and beat the guys top 15 in the UFC. So whoever they give me, it doesn't matter, and I'm not focused on that. I know my skill set is good enough to beat these guys at this level. And even if I face some adversity, I've done this long enough that I know how to pivot in the middle of the fight, or all right, that's not working, I got to go to this, or do I can navigate that in a fight now. Like I've done it long enough that I'm super comfortable there, and I think that's why I've had so much more success in my previous 2 fights against tough guys. But
You didn't make it look tough.
And that's what my son said that today. He's like, Dad, those fights were too easy. I'm like, no, they weren't easy fights, son. They were just,
You made
I
them look
prepared
easy.
the right way to make them look that way. And that's the hardest thing, is being, and that's what's frustrating in the same boat is like, I know where I should be fighting and what I can do to guys at the UFC as well. So back to your point is the training now is, I drill so much. Like I'm in love with drilling. I love drilling. I drill one-on-one with Mike Brown 1 to 2 times a week.
Former WEC featherweight champion, and I believe he's not the head coach at American Top Team, is he?
So the way it's ran there's probably 5 or so coaches that are like
pillars,
head coaches, and you kind of get to, you gravitate to who you like, you mesh with, and you kind of pick,
I think there's wisdom in that. And I can also see how that could also cause some ego too. How long until one pillar feels like they're more popular than the others,
Right.
and then branches off and does their own thing.
And that's what's amazing there. I can say is like the gym. It's like the UFC, man. It is so fine oiled that it just runs so smooth. All the coaches get along. Everybody knows what they're there for. Everyone's there to get better. It's like going to work. You go in, you help people. You have friendships in the room.
That's so important. Making sure that when you form a team, you want to make sure that everybody's credentialed, that everybody knows what they're doing, but also you want to make sure. And it sounds so stupid, but that age old adage of like, I hired the person that I wanted to get a beer with. It's kind of rings true, because if you're going to be in there 3 times a day, 6 days a week, at the very least, you want to make sure that everyone vibes, that everyone's enjoying their time, because if it doesn't, it's going to start feeling like work real fucking fast.
100%. And I think it starts from, like you said, the hierarchy of it all with Dan Lambert, the owner of the gym. And he's such a great giving individual. Like, it truly is a blessing. Like, the facility it provides, everything he does that comes full circle just for the benefit of us as fighters. And super grateful for that, man. But as far as me, like coaches I'm working with, and most of the time is Mike Brown, Thiago Alves. I hit pads with him once or twice a week. And Steve Mako, which is wrestling coach, and he's, 2-time national champ in college at Iowa and Oklahoma State, and just so many guys in the room. Me and Mike mesh so well because him and Patrick are like so similar. Like they're
Patrick?
Yes, Pat.
Sorry, Pat Smith
Yep.
Sorry.
Him and Patrick are just so very similar, and just like they both collect memorabilia of UFC stuff like that nobody else has. So many things they
breed the sport.
Know the same people from the older day, like Mike Brown talking to me. I bring up Steve Berger, and he's like, "Oh, really? I cornered Steve one time. He didn't have cornerman. I cornered him." Like, just
it's a small fucking world.
It is. It
you were
really
talking
is.
about how like 0.000000125 of the population of America will ever fight in the UFC, but it's like, yeah, if that population is that small, then imagine how small that circle
right.
is.
And I tell it to people all the time, like the real circle of MMA is so tight knit, and everybody knows.
And everybody knows everybody, and everybody knows everybody. That's why I often. Sometimes I'm surprised when like people will make certain like appearances at certain gyms. Like Tyron Woodley is coming down and training with Lucas Clay right now.
Right.
Him and
I've
Daryl
seen that,
Cobb.
yep.
But then it's like, Lucas posts this picture and you're like, oh my gosh. But then you go back, it's like, oh, Mike Rogers coached Tyron Woodley in high school. And then it only dawns on you even more. And like Steve Berger and Mike Rogers grew up together.
Neighbors.
Yes. This world is so fucking small, man. And you can expand it to the, a globe. But when you're fixated on such a small topic as extremely skilled hand-to-hand combat, that circle tends to stay small. That's interesting though, that like all these people kind of like interact and know each other, even if it's as simple as like I cornered him one time.
And it's so cool to be able to go around the world and places, and Grant says all the time, he's like, dude, we can't go anywhere without you knowing somebody or talking to somebody. I'm like, I've just always been that guy. Like I'll talk to people. I'm good at networking, and it's not looking for anything, you know, but it's nice, you know, like, hey, you're in town, come train, or you know, um, it's just nice to have connections with people. That's my favorite thing about fighting is the people that I get to meet and you know be around. I love that.
Hmm. I want to talk briefly about the present. You know, you're just coming off of this additional win on your career. And based on the conversation that we had previously, it sounded like the direction that you had to go on was get a couple fights against top tier talent, get some wins, and hopefully we'll get the call. What is it? Is there any sort of correspondence? Is there any sort of like, you know, does Jason call you and say like, "Hey, I just talked to Sean. They're aware of your last win." What are these conversations like? Like, do you have any sort of like, do you know how many more wins you need? Do you need what kind of caliber
Right.
person you need to be like, or is it just like we're just driving in the blind and hopefully we hit our destination?
One thing Jason told me, and it hit me so hard, was they don't need you until they need you.
Mm.
That's how it operates, and all I can do is be prepared. You know, all I can do is be prepared, keep winning fights, and the more so thing of it all is for me to keep getting fights scheduled. Is that way I can be prepared if something's short notice. If I have a fight to train for, I'm gonna be ready to fight in case. And we've had I don't know how many occasions where we're like, hey, throw your name in the hat, short notice. Something we might get it, we might not. And been super close. Like I'm super confident it will come, and it's gonna be short notice. But I will be ready, and I'm not worried, and I quit worrying about what if I do all this and I never get re-signed in the UFC. Well, then I know I did everything I could, you know.
Well, I would say the odds are in your favor.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, the more
I think
fights you
so.
win, the more people you're eliminating from that similar contention. So it's like by proxy of extrapolation of this, it's like if you win enough fights, you're literally the only
Right.
guy they can sign. So it's like
And
it's bound to
I'll,
happen.
I'll do that if I
we would
have
just
to,
like
you
sooner
know?
rather
Right.
than later.
Just because the age, you know, I'm 30, which is prime years in fighting. If people don't understand that, like you're 30 to 34 ish, right in there. That little
I would say
groove.
depending on the weight class. In
For
your
sure.
weight class, I
100%,
actually agree.
right.
But if you're a heavyweight,
You can
tends
fight
be
till you're
like,
45.
brother, look at John, look at Alex. Like they're like kind of pushing it and they're fucking starching people.
Right.
But I think the lighter you go, the more explosivity and athleticism is a factor, then the more that
That's
comes
the
into
first
play.
thing that leaves you is your speed
Yeah.
and your legit, like your explosiveness, that muscle movement. So,
Durability too. I don't know about you, but like near the end of my career, I just didn't heal as well as I used to.
oh, dude, it's crazy. I remember just going to training for so many years and just show up. Don't stretch. Don't
No.
warm up. Let's do this. I don't need
I
to
had
stretch.
Taco Bell in the
Yeah.
parking lot. Let's fucking go, boys.
Now I'm like one of the first ones in the gym, like 30 minutes
Foam
early,
roller.
everything. I'm like, I can't afford to be off. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to take care of, but that's when this call comes, I want to be like a Kevin Holland. I want to, what Charles Johnson's doing right now. That's what I want to do. I want to get in the UFC. I want to fight as much as you guys, run the tread off these tires. That's what I want. And
Because of your age, like
the age, and I think my skill level. I think
now you're ready.
I truly think. I think I was a little premature when I got in before, but now I truly think, whether anyone in the world that listens to this believes me or not, I know the guys in my circle and in the room know that I am a top 15 fighter in the UFC.
That's all that matters.
And I just want the chance to prove it. Like, man, it speaks volumes on itself. Like, the past two camps for Dustin, I was one of his main training partners for Islam and Benoit. Like, I sparred with Dustin a lot. And that right there just lets me reassure myself. It was so awesome being a part of a championship camp. Like, was out there because Grant fought on the same card. I cornered Grant for that and was there when Dustin fought Islam and was there when he was cutting weight, everything, the whole process. He was telling me, I'm like, dude, thank you. Like, let me be a tiny, tiny part of your camp. Like, it was amazing and just something I keep in my back pocket, you know, like that was special. That was cool, you know, to smell the roses actually while I'm doing this for once.
How much does that add to you? I have to think about how I'm going to word this, because experiencing these things doesn't make you a better fighter per se, but how much value are you getting in being in that sphere and being in that world, right? Like, even when it's not necessarily about you, it's at the highest level of the thing you're pursuing, and that is mixed martial
Right.
arts. When you're a part of these camps, when you're in the sauna helping cut weight, all these other things, the conversations you're having, I actually think personally that's some of the most, like, when I look back at my career, those are some of the most memorable moments. The people that were around me, the real rough times, or getting ready for the real big times. It's not necessarily the Monday to Friday. It's
Right.
everything that leads to Saturday, right? Do you think that that's really amplified, or maybe you tell me, Ariana, it doesn't fucking matter. You know, being in a camp, it didn't really affect me in any which way. I was still a killer before. I'm still a killer after. Or do you think even if it's like 1%, do you think it made you better in any way, even if it is mentally?
100% it did.
Yeah.
Without a doubt it did. There's no denying
Proximities,
right.
osmosis.
When you're around like a level of greatness and like that high level of fighters, you can feel the energy. Like it just rubs off on you, man. Like the training sessions, and I think the biggest thing, it reassures you that you're doing the right things. I'm doing what he's doing. Oh, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna start doing that. You know, vice versa. Or when someone comes up to you like that's high level guy that's in the UFC, you know, that's ranked, and like, hey, can you help me get ready for this fight? You're like, my guy, you're really good. Like
Sure.
that's very reassuring.
It also
you
says
know?
something about what they think of you, that they want
Right.
you to be a part of that. It's a compliment.
And the first year I was there, you know, I was the new face in the room. I'm not in the UFC, and that for me, I understand that. Like, but I was the guy that's
You don't think you being in the UFC prior had any weight?
maybe
Former UFC?
maybe
I think it
there's
does,
just
brother.
there's
There's a lot of
just
guys that will never have gotten to that level.
there's so many guys in there that are just so high level, and then me, I'm chomping at the bit to get rounds with them. Like, hey, I'm bugging them. Like, hey, do you have a round 3 too? I know we just did round 2, but you want to go 3? If not, 4 or 5, whatever. If you got another one, let me know.
God
And
bless.
I'm still like that. Like, I want the hardest rounds, and I love that. Like, being able to chase something. I can measure myself when I get closer.
It's a goal that you can see, so you can judge the distance. You can now start to, like, okay, I'm so far away, but if I do this thing, how much closer did I get? Okay, how much more of that do I have to do? I think I think you're correct in your summation of, like, being around people. We often say, like, you know, show me your friends, I'll show you who you are. It goes farther than that. It's like, what circles do you navigate in? If you're around a bunch of entrepreneurs that are go-getters and business oriented, how long until you start your own business?
Right.
How long until you start doing things? If you're around alpha male killers, how long until you feel like you're either A, you don't belong and you'll leave of your
Right.
own volition, or you start stepping up to be like the guy to your left and to your right? I think it's just something that naturally happens. So I kind of knew the answer to that question, but I still wanted to ask it because I don't necessarily think there's a golden path. You were talking earlier about how, like, you know, these last 2 fights, you didn't watch a whole lot of tape. You watched enough to understand,
Right.
but you didn't fixate on it. But then you have, like, guys like John Jones who tape study all the time. I think martial arts is just like life. Different strokes for different folks.
100%.
And, you know, the beauty of it is, and this is why I never trust academics in anything. I trust people that have done it, because theory is always inferior to application. I trust the guy who's had one fight over the guy who's trained for 2 years. The guy who has had one fight understands fighting better because he was in the shit.
Yep.
And now if you have both, you've been training for 10 years and you have a lot of fights, even better. That's what I'm trying to say is, like, don't just be an academic or a researcher, also apply. Do you think, oh man, I don't want to sound disrespectful when I say this. If it doesn't happen, and if it does, what is your mentality on your career? Let's say you get like 5 more wins, or let's say like, knock on wood, 5 losses straight. If you don't get re-signed, what is your mentality towards what you've done, where you're at, the culmination?
I think the biggest thing I have in that theory of it all is the people that are around me, surrounding me. I respect what they say and I respect their knowledge on this sport. So whatever position I may be in, say I was on a skid of losing in, they're like, "Hey, dude, you're not gonna,
This isn't for
get
you anymore.
re-signed. It's not gonna happen." Then I'll walk away. I'll walk
Would
away.
you retire or would you fight as long as you could? Because for me, I often ask that question, and once I realize I'm not going to be the best in the world, I was like, okay, on to the next.
That
I don't think there's a wrong answer. By the way.
no, I 100% agree with you. My wife thinks that I can't live without this, and she's right now.
But what happens when
But
you're
I tell her,
40, 50?
I say this when I'm done fighting. I want to be done with it. Like I don't want to coach. I might still train here and there. You know, it's gonna be hard because it's been my everyday life, my identity for so long. But I try not to attach my identity as a fighter. You know, it's like
Dakota, with respect, I don't think that's possible.
I know I don't think it is either.
Even if you, I think it's possible to not fight. I think it's possible to not coach. I think it's possible to like escape from that world. But the problem is, how many of your friends are fighters? How
Right.
many of the people that you know, your inner circles,
Right.
friends, families, whatever. So like, even if you take yourself out of that, the network that you've built is in that world.
Right.
Do you?
It's such a and that's so true.
But let me flip that though. Let's say the next fight is in the UFC. If you were to get re-signed and get another crack at it, would you look at it as this is now my time? Everything has had to lead. Everything that has happened before has led me to this moment, or do you feel like it's like, let me prove people wrong, I do belong, or do you feel like, let's ride this wave as long as we can? How are you approaching this?
I think like right now, when that call comes, it's not to any naysayers, anything, all that. It's for myself and my family, you know, just to prove me and my circle right. Like, hey, you guys believed in me. That I'm gonna prove you right, and I'm gonna, like you said, ride this wave. I'm gonna fight as much as I can, and as often as I can, and win as many fights as I can. I don't care about the UFC belt. I don't care about being ranked, any of that. Every time I step in the cage, all my only mindset is have your best performance today. It's all you focus on is your best performance, and the wins will take care of themselves. And that's what I've been really focusing on lately is go out there. You're not afraid to lose. You're not afraid to go for things. You're not afraid, to just leave it online. Try new things if you have to, but the wins will take care of yourselves if you just go out there and you don't quit or break. And I live by that. And I think when I do get re-signed eventually I'm going to be able to just go on a run like I'm on now. I think it'll continue. I truly think it'll continue in the UFC just because I know how well I do with the best guys in the world.
I love the belief in momentum as well. If you are succeeding, a lot of times that leads to more success and vice versa. That's why, guys might get like 2 losses in a row and they think it's over.
Right.
You can always bounce back, but trends, the more conversations I have on fighting, the more I realize that like hindsight's 2020 and you don't fucking know until after you've known.
Not at all.
I've seen guys that I thought were done come back and crush it. And I've seen guys that I thought were going to be world beaters. 2 fights later, you're like, you might get cut. And it's such a wild, crazy, unforgiving world. And I don't know. I love all forms of martial arts. I think it's exciting. But I really gravitate towards MMA specifically. And maybe it's because I did it.
It's just the true measuring stick.
Brother.
Everybody knows.
When there's that many ways to lose, you have to appreciate when someone wins, I do want to ask one more question with related to your career because it was something that we kind of glossed over. But you said that, your first interaction with this world was actually your father fighting. I don't know this. Are both of your parents still alive? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
God bless. What was what was their reaction when, like, throughout your career, like, you get signed? Was their reaction to you wanting to get in amateur years, pro years, getting signed, getting cut now?
Right.
What was that roller coaster like with your
They've
parents?
always supported me. Like
Yeah.
they've always, been behind me. They've always, when times were shitty, helped me if I need financial help or anything. Through my whole life, they've been amazing in that,
Supportive.
and so much like the hard work and all that is driven in me from them. And just seeing hard work, I really believe your actions do a lot more than your words do. And that's my biggest thing with my kids. I tell my wife this all the time is I'm just praying by proxy that they see what I'm doing. How do I tell my kids to chase their dreams if I never did it? I want them to truly do what makes them happy. I don't care what they do. And that's what we're with my son, whatever sport, you don't have to wrestle because I did. If you don't want to wrestle, don't wrestle. If you want to play the harmonica, you want to play bass, I don't care what you do, but whatever you do, you're giving me 100%. That's all I ask. And
If you don't mind me asking, how old are your kids?
my son's 9, my daughter's 5.
Okay, so the old dude, I would actually say they watch and they assimilate. I can only tell from my daughter, kids are so much more intelligent than we give them credit for. And they are sponges.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they're looking at you even for the things you don't say. Sometimes I have to kind of catch myself whenever I'm around my daughter, like little things, because I know she's watching, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're on the ball. And I think your approach to fathering is very similar to mine because, people ask me all the time, like, oh, I bet you're going to do this with her and that with her. I was like, listen, man, no one told me to walk the path I did.
Mm-mm.
This is what I chose to do. And my parents were always there, good, bad, and better. And that's exactly what I'm going to do with her. What if she tells me, Dad, I'm going to go, I want to play the piano. Okay, cool. We'll buy a piano.
Mm-hmm.
Dad, I want to do swimming. Okay, we'll get you in swim club. Like, throw a bunch of stuff and see what sticks.
Yep.
And then whatever she gravitates towards, at the very least, I know that when I die and leave this earth, at least she's doing what she wants to do and not doing what she thinks would make me happy.
And us growing up in wrestling, like just being in the room, you see the kids that are in there.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the dad.
Or
And
the mom. Either
way.
Yeah.
And I just never wanted my kid to feel like that. I
And
never
you see how miserable they are? Because it's also a tough fucking sport. No practice is easy. So, like, you're in this fucking grinder and you don't want to be here. But mom and dad are like, let's go, Timmy. And you're
and
like,
then you're losing matches,
Yeah.
and then you're quitting. Son.
Yes.
I'm paying for you to go to Team St. Louis, and you're not even winning matches. Yeah, I just want them to be happy. That's it. That's the most important thing on earth. Is
do you think that comes and stems from? I have a theory on that, and it's gonna sound really bad. I think it stems from inadequacies in their own personal life, and they're trying to like extend their failures onto their kid to get an achievement that they never got.
right?
But it could be in a topic that their kid doesn't even care about. I was never state champ, but my son is, and meanwhile your son's like, I just want to go play video games.
I wish I could see a stat on how many fathers that are state champs or state medalists.
Oh, their sons also were?
Or that they make their kids wrestle, or vice versa. The kids that their dads that never medaled or never even qualified, but they're trying to preach,
Whatever it is to their kid.
I see those kids get it worse than any kids. There's the dads that weren't medalists or high successful wrestlers are the worst wrestling dads in the game. Just
Dude, success has an aura. When I'm talking to you and I'm thinking about this, like all the good fighters, all the good wrestlers, they have like this, the way they walk is different. The confidence in which they speak and the humbleness that they carry compared to the people that like never achieve that. It's almost like the opposite. If success breeds in you a calm, then failure, I think, kind of brews a storm.
mm-hmm.
And you kind of see the outcome of that. And now, obviously, there's going to be outliers. I'm not saying that every state champ is then going to be like this humble, grandiose person. And I'm not saying that every person that like didn't achieve some sort of goal that they went out for is then going to be like this jaded person. But I am saying there seems to be a trend, and I'm just, anecdotal evidence, what I'm perceiving. I think the way you think about fatherhood is very similar to mine, and I'd like to think it's the proper way because it's the one where we allow the kids to choose. I want to guide them. I want to make sure they know what's right and what's wrong. And within these parameters, do whatever you want. Just make sure you're not crossing any boundaries you shouldn't be.
It's so, like, the families, like her family, my family, like, the in-laws and grandparents, all that. Like, I'm so different, I feel like, than any side of the families, like, on my stance of, parenting and, like, politics. And I tell them all the time, like, "Oh, what are you doing with this? And what are you, like, I've been saying this for years. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I don't identify as that. I identify as a man who chooses right from wrong on a daily basis, and that's all I can do. And I'm sure there's probably things that I need to pay attention to that are important to future endeavors for me or my kids. But I truly think the most important thing is showing them love, showing them what's truly right from wrong morally, and letting them choose to be happy. That it's all that other stuff I really don't think matters. If you feel loved and you can do what you want and your parents have your back, and the biggest thing I preach to them is don't be scared to fail. Please do not be scared to fail. Like him playing baseball, I'm like, I don't care if you strike out every time, just swing the bat. Like it's worse to go out there failing because you were scared to fail than to go 100% and fail.
There's a famous quote on that. It's essentially like the fear of failure has killed more dreams than failure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it sounds like a stupid quote, but you're like, how many people have failed versus succeeded? Obviously, more people will fail than succeed by proxy of, like, if there's one first place, everyone below first, quote unquote, failed, right?
Yeah.
But how many people didn't even fucking go for it because they were so afraid of failure? And I think there's a wisdom to that. And it's like, you might not be the best. You might not be the best at anything ever in your life ever. But at least you were the one that fucking tried, man.
That's all I can speak to is I can lay my head down on my pillow every single night and get damn good sleep, knowing that I'm doing everything I can. And to all the people, like, I come from a town of 4,000 people, small town, everybody knows everybody, everyone's in everybody's business. And I think the biggest thing you get with people that never did, whatever it may be. I say this all the time. If I wanted to be the best grass cutter, a lawn mowing business, I'd have the best damn business in the surrounding area because I know how hard I'm going to work for something. And the people that don't, they want failure on people that are chasing their dreams because then it reassures them, if I fail, yeah, then I made this safe choice.
Small people do.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Small people do. That's I used to think that I wanted successful people around me because that would breed success by proxy. But if you have successful people around you that don't want you to be successful, it will cause you to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to learn that kind of the hard way in my earlier years. And I'm not talking about success in business. I'm talking about fighting.
Right.
It sounds like you have a very good inner circle around you that took time to kind of coalesce and get together. But if one or two of those people didn't really want you to succeed, it would show. It would show in your performances. It would show in practice. Mm-hmm. It would show in injuries. It would show in all these things because they actually mean you harm where they're perceiving some sort of blessing for you. And that is hard to do. I think that's a blessing in disguise. When you have people around you that truly care for you, you got to hold on to that, especially as a man. You have to hold on to that with like vice grips, man, because that shit is hard to come by and easy to fucking lose.
I tell people that more than anything with when I got cut from the UFC.
How many people are around?
I seen it. Like, a first person seen that. Like, I hear people talk about it all the time. Like, yeah, whatever. And then you see it happen. And
when you
so
say see
grateful.
it, you mean like friends kind of recede,
acquaintances,
training partners.
Yeah, like you just see
People just don't fuck with you no more.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm so grateful for that. Like I'm so grateful for those things to happen because it truly shows you who's really there, and that's where I'm gonna invest my time and what I care. Um, Patrick says to me all the time, "Don't. Why would you care what someone says about you if you wouldn't even go ask that person for advice?"
Mm.
You know, like, and people on the internet saying, if I'm not gonna ask them for advice on something, why am I gonna give a shit about what they're saying about me?
Or what is their credential?
You know? So I'm so grateful because that makes me appreciate my circle so much more and put more into that. I can pour more out of my cup into theirs and really trust and believe what they're saying and doing more so.
There also seems to be, at least in my anecdotal evidence, a correlation to success. There is a correlation to small people and wanting negative for others and wanting others to fail because it's a lot easier to bring someone else down than to lift yourself up. And there's a correlation that where they're at in life. And then when you start hitting an upper echelon, and I'm sure this is synonymous with any industry.
Right.
It could be grass cutting. Maybe your lawn care business is like hitting new heights, and then like some other guy who's also doing the same thing, like real recognized real, so to speak. But it could be in fighting, it could be in business, it could be in anything. It could be in fatherhood. Like
right.
you see the other fathers that are doing it right, and you're like, okay, that's another one. Like I recognize you, you know. Once you get to a certain level, you start realizing this connotation of like, you know, there's only so many seats at the table, there's only so much food on the plate. There's two ways to look at that. You could look at that as like, I need to take the chair from someone else, or you can say, oh, let's extend the fucking table. Why is this table this size? Let's get more chairs.
Right.
Let's get more plates. Let's get more food. And I think every person that I've ever met that thinks the latter and not the former, there's always some sort of relationship with success. And I'm not saying money. They have a loving wife and loving kids, and like their kids are great, and they seem to have like a very strong knit family. Or maybe, you know, some sort of collapse happened in their life, a loss of, they lost their job, they lost a loved one, whatever, but they still seem to have like this strength in them to bounce back and kind of re-emerge from those ashes like a phoenix, so to speak. It's very similar to you. Like I don't mean to sound like hyperbolic or like super like, you know, fucking pathological or anything like that, but like, you know, you hit this stride, you got to the show that you wanted to get to, things didn't go your way, you kind of, you know, Icarus getting too close to the sun, start falling, but then you get your wings back underneath you and now you're back on the ascent. I think it's a lot fucking harder to fail and then succeed than it is to just succeed.
That is the first run to the UFC so much easier
than
the second one, and the opponents obviously are harder, and it's not even the fighting aspect. You know, it's the training, the moving the family, just the whole culmination of everything that's led to where we're at right now, and it's not for the faint of heart, but man, I swear it's made me just such a rock solid, like in my foundation as a father, a husband, a friend, a person. You know, it's helped mold me so much more than, you know, the first run. This second run's been like, it's gave me so much more as a person than the first one did.
God bless. I do, if you don't mind, I want to spend the rest of the time kind of, because we've been speaking now for 2 hours and some change on just specifically you. And I do want to say thank you for, you know, the transparency, man. You've said a lot. And, you know, a lot of people don't have to come on a podcast. A lot of people don't have to talk about this stuff. Or a lot of people could have been like, hey, I'll talk about anything but that. You know what I mean? You, for the record, you said nothing's off the table, which thank you. I appreciate that. But I do kind of want to ask you some questions that steer a little bit away from this, but still within the world. And that is some of the things that we were talking about beforehand. You know, you're sitting at the hotel, you're waiting to get on the Ultimate Fighter. Connor comes in, whatever happens, happens. Now you're an alternate. Does it affect you in the way you look at MMA? When you're doing mixed martial arts and you're competing in all this, do you wish there were more than just the UFC? Because I know that, like, from the outside looking in, people say that there's one FC, there's Bellator, PFL. If you're in MMA, it's the UFC or nothing. Like, that's the penultimate achievement and the only true breeding ground for the best fighters if you ask any fighter. Now, I'm not saying that fighters in the PFL are bad or Bellator. Far from. There's killers throughout. But what I am saying is if you're like the world champion at PFL, I would love to see you against the top 15 in the UFC or ONE FC or what have you. You know, and there has been some cross-pollination. There has been some successful guys. And there's been some guys that I don't want to say any names, but there's been some guys that have fallen short. Do you wish that there was more competition at the highest level, or do you think that maybe this is what's best because through, I don't want to say the word monopolization, but through a congregation of resources, the UFC is also the promotion that gets to pay the most, right? Say whatever you want about MMA pay and the UFC and all that stuff. No one's making the kind of money that like, you know, John Jones just made or Alex Pereira is making, or any of these guys. So from your objective view, do you wish there was like a UFC A, UFC B? Do you like that there's just this one goal? How do you view that relationship? And obviously I understand that like you're also one person trying to get signed to the UFC, so I'm not trying to get like anything controversial out of you. I'm just trying to, because I can see the pros and the cons, honestly. We said it off the record that the UFC and what the UFC has done has created like a boom for so many fighters, and you know, boxing hasn't been able to kind of replicate it. And with the UFC kind of branching out, I'd be interested to see what that's going to look like. But just from the perspective of MMA, your sport, what's your view on the UFC?
It's the pinnacle, man. It's the best. It's the gold standard. There's top to bottom, fighters are better. Top to bottom, the pay's better. Recognition, just production, top to bottom staff, everything is the best. I think MMA is in a scary kind of position right now because Bellator and PFL not doing so hot. They just canceled another show. I just seen driving up today right before I left. Corey Anderson, Patchy Mix, and Patricio Pitbull all very frustrated, tweeting out
with Bellator
not getting them fights. Their fights keep shows getting canceled, getting pushed back. Like Patchy Mix said he's supposed to fight in April. Now it's pushed back to January, and now that card's falling through.
And these three fighters are also like the pinnacle of those promotions.
Champs,
they could fight in the UFC if they wanted to.
Right. Just from what I see too in the gym, because there's a healthy mix of
UFC, PFL, Bellator, ONE FC at ATT.
Yes, and the UFC guys are just so much more active.
Yeah.
You know, Johnny Eblin, Bellator champ, you know, middleweight champ for them. He's probably one of the most active guys on the Bellator roster, and it's still
one or two a year.
Yeah, and I get it as a champ, you're not gonna fight as much. You know, just the way it works out usually.
Alex Pereira is like, hold my beer.
Exactly. But man, it's just you need the competition for the UFC. I think that, like you said, that'll push them to be better as well. But it's just so weird right now with, you know, you got bare knuckle, all these other things, slap fighting, all this stuff. But nothing is on that level of the UFC. It's just it's a weird spot, man.
I think the consistency is actually a double-edged sword, if you don't mind me saying. Like, there was a time where I could tell you, specifically, like, you know, probably like UFC 180 and before. Like, you could say the main card out and be like, oh, I know that fighter, I know this fighter. And I said this off the record, but I'll say it again. Ever since Conor and Ronda, I feel like the UFC has been really trying to push the brand of the UFC more than individual stars. Or at the very least, if they're developing stars, they develop the stars within the ecosystem of the UFC, kind of like a dome, like a ceiling. And there were a few fighters like Ronda and Conor where, in a weird way, were bigger than the sport and caused the sport to grow, but simultaneously then, because, you know, fighters are going to come and go, but you want the brand to exist.
Right.
Fighters for a brief time there, like Conor had a lot of say, I mean, the argument can be made that he still does, but less or so. And I think what happened was the UFC kind of like raised their eyes, like, ooh, maybe we did something that we weren't ready for here, and now we got to pay Conor, 20 million just to show because he's bigger than the brand, and if we don't, and we keep him for a year and the contract extends, he might go fight for the PFL or Bellator, and we can't have that either. I think the UFC is in a really weird space where they're trying to push the brand more than the fighters, and it's actually causing the brand to suffer because no one fell in love with the UFC. They fell in love with MMA because of a fighter. For me, it was George St. Pierre. I used to watch GSP fight. I was like, damn, this guy's just fucking good everywhere. But I wasn't like, the UFC is the shit. I'm like, man, George St. Pierre's the shit. What is that? MMA. What's MMA? Oh, mixed martial arts? Wrestling's one of those martial arts. I wrestle. That's kind of how it started. And I feel like, in a weird way, fighters have never gotten better. You see some of these kids now that are like 18 years old, they're fucking killers, right? But the sport seems to be plateauing in terms of popularity, in terms of a lot of like, metrics. And you brought up slap fighting. I don't think it's a coincidence that I feel like MMA is plateauing and Dana White is looking to kind of horizontally integrate other martial arts. Like any business 101 class would tell you, like, there's only so much you can go up in any one industry. So like there's vertical integration where you kind of take all the things that kind of go into that end product and you kind of assimilate and extrapolate on them. So like the UFC PI, what makes UFC good? Fighters. Well, how can we help the fighters recover? How can we help them train? You have the food in there and all these other things to make the fighters, make the product better. Vertical integration, horizontal integration. The industry is martial arts. MMA is not the only martial art. You might even create new industries like slap fighting. You might bring BJJ in, Zuffa boxing. I think Dana White and his staff are fucking geniuses when it comes to promotion and it comes to martial arts. And I don't think they're idiots.
Oh, no.
I think they probably see the same shit that I'm feeling, and they're kind of planning for the future. Like, get Slap in here, do UFC BJJ, sign some guys, do UFC boxing, and then don't cross homogenize. Keep them as separate entities, because then you have, instead of one pillar, multiple. I could also be wrong, but what do you think about the trajectory of MMA? Not the fighters, because I think the best fighters are still coming up, right? Like, you're better today than you were yesterday, right?
100%.
I'm talking about the industry, the money, the trajectory of it.
It's so hard to speak on because comparatively speaking to every other sport, it's a baby. It's 30
Very
years
true.
old.
Very nascent.
It's so young compared to all the other sports.
And it competes on a global stage where, like,
right.
You do the World Series in baseball, but it's in the U.S., right? So it's like, how much of the world is it, really?
So I think there's just so much more there's a lot of room to grow, but it's like, what do they do? And I'm just a fighter, so it's hard for me to speculate and think where they're going, because it's better than it's ever been,
Agree.
So it's hard to say. And they're the best.
When you
promotion,
say better than it's ever been, or what do you mean by that? Do you mean the product? Do you mean the pay? Do you mean, like, when you say that, what's going into that?
The pay's better than it's ever been. The fighters are
the product, yeah. The fights are better than they've ever been.
Where they're going, their shows, the production. Like, look what they did at the Sphere,
That's pretty fucking
things
dope.
like that. There's Bellator and PFL, they're not going to do that.
No.
It's just the
Brother,
apex
boxing's not going to do that.
No, not at all. There's nothing like it. And people,
maybe a Canelo fight. Maybe. You're talking about, like, the top of the top. But, like, they just did that for a one-off. Mm-hmm. Just because it just so happened to fall on that date.
It's insane what they can do, where they go, like, just in all the countries they go to, and just how finely tuned it is. Just, there's no mess ups. Like, it is on local shows and small shows. There's someone getting ready to walk out and they ain't walking out.
Or their audio's messed up, or
They're
the stream
sick,
goes
you
down.
know?
Or by the way, that's not even like local shows. That's like I've seen it on LFA, I've seen it on Bellator, I've seen it on PFL. I will acknowledge, and I don't think I've ever not said this, but the UFC is the gold standard, 100%. My question is more towards like, do you think it's growing right now? Do you think MMA is growing?
I've talked about this recently too, and I feel like it's kind of at a halt, kind of. Like, obviously, the fighters are still getting better. The fights are better. It's just for the casuals. If you're into this world, you're immersed in it. It's still like fresh to you. It's fun. It's exciting. But let's just say we took Bilal Muhammad. We took Bilal Muhammad and we took him out to my small town, 4,000 people. We went out to eat. There's probably nobody in there that would recognize him or know who he is. And there could be a couple other champs like that. They have no idea who they are.
But they'd recognize Dana White.
Conor McGregor. Conor goes anywhere, people will know him, you know? And I think he obviously helped the UFC so much, and anyone would be an idiot to deny that fact.
I think there's a correlation between his ascension and them going and selling. Let me put it to you that way. Because like when Conor was on the up, he had just beaten Jose Aldo. He was going to be double champ. Like he was trying to go be double champ. That's when they sold. That's when the UFC or the Fertitta brothers sold to Endeavor, and then subsequently caused Endeavor to go public. Which don't look at the stock price now, but
yeah, he definitely blew it out the seams. Like,
but that's what I'm trying to say is like,
it can happen again. Though.
But if you look at history, right? History would say that like if you make the star, making a star tends to rise the tide of all boats, being every other fighter. Like before Conor, there was like a certain amount of pay, there was a certain amount of status quo, and then say what you want about Conor as the individual. I'm taking that kind of out of it, but I'm taking the enigma that he was, caused everyone's pay. When he fought Chad Mendes, they got paid $500,000 flat. And that was like, yo, that's a fucking payout. Do you remember that? When people were saying that, like, yo, Chad and Conor got 500 flat for that? That's crazy. Now you're getting UFC, and that was like just the show. That's not pay-per-view points. What I'm saying is like just the base purse. Now base purses are like 3, 4, 5 million. Of course, some of that is the growth of the UFC, duly noted. But I'm also saying that it took individuals to grow the UFC, to kind of get it out of. Every industry seems to be like ascension, plateau, and then there's some sort of break-even point where you ascent again. And I think that's what we're at right now. There needs to be some sort of shakeup. You're at a plateau. There needs to be something different to cause an ascension again.
I think that's what's so beautiful about it as well is it's an individualized sport. There's no uniform and like a team competing. You're gonna have unique individuals that are gonna come into the sport and pull the
rest of the industry to buy it. Yeah.
And you have guys that can do it, but it's the hardest thing in the world to be perfect at your whole career. And you had guys like O'Malley, you know, that were starting to get there. And I think Pereira the guy is just unbelievable. The little experience that he has in MMA to come in and do what he's doing.
Yeah, he's got
the death touch, man.
Dude, he's got the death touch. And then also, I also think that it's like the styles of fights, right? Lots of strikers, which I think I would be interested to see. I would be interested to see if the UFC actually books John Jones versus Alex. And I'm not saying that Alex doesn't have a fighter's chance. Everyone does. But anyone who objectively looks at that fight and looks at the skill sets, I don't think it would be as competitive as people think. Or at the very least, it would be competitive until John decided to not make it competitive, right? And I think you're kind of landing on something, and that is it's so incredibly difficult to be consistent in any sport, especially mixed martial arts, because there are so many ways to lose. You could be doing everything right and then get caught in the third round, and there goes the fight.
You can be winning, like you said, 14 minutes and 20 seconds of the fight and lose.
Grant Dawson won a fight like that.
1 second.
Yeah, won a fight like that.
You can't be down, or you can't be up 60 3-0 in a football game with 2
Then-
minutes left in the
and
fourth
lose,
quarter
yeah.
and lose.
That's why people start walking out of the arena because they know it's a foregone conclusion. I also think that it helps in fighting. The reason why I love fighting and why I love wrestling too is because there is that like finality. Like in wrestling, you could be losing 14-0 and you can still switch it up on the guy and get a pin and you win, even with the second left. Same thing in fighting. You could be losing 3 rounds, 5 rounds if it's a championship fight. 30 seconds left on the clock. You can still get the fucking finish. You can still get the knockout. And there's a beauty to that. And it is exciting and all these other things. I just don't know, outside of like cultivating true stars, which is incredibly difficult in this sport, what the answer is, what the solution is.
That's why they get paid to do
That's
it.
what they get paid to do what they get paid. You're not wrong, brother.
I
If,
think-
if we did have the solution, we wouldn't be sitting here today.
It's crazy, and I think some people might be worn out on it, like O'Malley. I feel like his whole Connor was authentic,
Dude,
and
that is
people
Conor.
love that. People love when something's authentic and it's true. O'Malley, it just seems. I could be wrong. That could be 100% him. I don't know him personally, but it just doesn't seem authentic. It doesn't seem. It's hard to put, like, people just don't relate to him like everyone related with Connor, you know?
Well, I think the difference is the fact that he's just a little bit more. He's a little bit more flamboyant, which Connor was a shit talker. He was brash, but he was like, quote unquote, normal, right? I think there's something to be said about, like, you know, Sean O'Malley with the goofy glasses, with the pink hair and all that other stuff. It's just going to turn off a lot of guys.
Right.
I'm sure it'll probably also bring a lot of guys into the fold. Like, it works both ways. I think there was something special about Connor, and that it was also timing. That there wasn't anyone like him before that. Or at the very least, when we looked at, like, the quote-unquote greats, it was exclusively skill sets. When we looked at Anderson Silva, it wasn't because Anderson on the mic. When we looked at GSP, it wasn't because GSP on the mic or whatever. It was because they were out there beating the shit out of guys. You know what I mean? And Connor was the first time where, like, he was doing that and also entertaining after. I would make the argument that Connor on the mic was just as entertaining as a Connor fight. You know, especially that lead up with Jose Aldo.
It's like waiting for Derek Lewis. Everyone's excited for a post fight.
That's actually a really good person to like. But I would make the argument that the Derek Lewis is like within the ecosystem of the UFC.
Right.
If you don't know what the UFC is, you have no idea who Derek Lewis is.
Nope.
But if you do know the UFC, chances are you're a Derek Lewis fan. And that's what I meant earlier by, like, there were some fighters, specifically Ronda Rousey and Conor, that kind of transcended that. I knew people that were like 60 years old that were like, oh, do you know Conor McGregor? And they had no idea what the UFC was. And there's just two ways to look at that. If you're Dana White, you can look at that as a pro or a positive. And I think it's both simultaneously. It is a positive and it's a con at the same time. It's like, okay, you know, I don't see a future in which they allow that to happen again, which is a shame. Because I think that's what we need right now. We need someone. We need a Canelo. We need a Floyd Mayweather. We need a Tyson Fury. We need someone to, like, fucking just maybe 17 more wins. It's going to be Dakota Bush.
That's what I tell them. Like, why don't you do? I'm like, it's just not authentic for me.
If you force it, it won't be received.
It's not. It's not. And people know that because you've seen how many people tried it after Conor.
I also don't think you need it. You want to know who makes me think that? Alex Pereira. Says one fucking word, Chama, people lose their fucking minds.
He's just that stone. He's got the...
Because he's got the finishes.
Right.
Remember what you were saying earlier? Finishes matter more than wins. He's finishing every fight. Exciting fights. I think there's room for it to happen. I just think, let me put it to you this way. If you have an Alex Pereira type guy, but you give him solid English to market himself, you have that.
Right.
You have that. And he's clean for the most part. I know there was like some allegation, but like the problem with John Jones is all the bullshit, all the baggage. It's hard to get behind that guy. I am a fan of his fighting, not a fan of him. Whereas Alex Pereira, you can be a fan of both. You know what I mean?
I think John too, like you said, all that just kind of tarnishes it. And
I'm not even talking about the steroids.
No, I'm saying
talking about
the
hit
and run, all
the trouble with the law. I get it, dude. You're a wild guy, but like, so is everybody else. You're not seeing me get arrested. You know what I mean?
And he was never that guy either, you know? Like, John was the man. Like, he was so damn, like, he's the GOAT in my eyes.
He could have been, but then the trouble with the law. When he had beat Daniel Cormier, right? That was like a special moment where I think he could have like really ran with it. But then it was like, PEDs, cocaine, hit and run. It was like a succession of things. There was like 2 or 3 years he didn't fight, not because he didn't want to, not because of the UFC, but because he couldn't. He was like in legal battles and had to forego the belt. And remember when Daniel Cormier got the belt and then the first thing John Jones tweets is like, "You're not the real champ because like I never lost it or whatever." It's like, dude, yeah, you kind of did though, brother. You kind of fucking did. I don't know. I want to see this stuff succeed and grow because then it means more money in the pockets of everybody else that's fighting from top to bottom. Because the feeder leagues feed into the UFC, the amateurs feed into the feeder leagues. It's like, a rising tide lifts all ships, even the smallest of ships. And I think you're seeing that. I mean, look at the local promotions now. I hate to kind of scurry away, but like NFA has production for like a small local show that's on par with like LFA now. And LFA was looked at as like the premier feeder league. So like you're getting now local shows, APFC over in Milwaukee with Anthony Pettis, same fucking story. Synergy over in Kansas City. Like you're getting local promotions. Everyone's stepping up their game now. You could be, when I fought as an amateur, and I'm sure when you fought as an amateur, it was like in front of 200 people if we were lucky, right? I was at a banquet center. Now these amateurs are fighting at like Ballpark Village, the Armory, the Factory. Like they have, and they're also fighting with like people like you. It's never been better to be a fighter. Simultaneously, they have to do something.
The biggest thing we didn't hit on that I think is hurting the UFC more than anything is the Contender Series. I think the Contender Series.
You think it's hurting the UFC? Why?
I think it's hurting MMA.
Okay, why?
Because all these kids that are younger, they realize, hey, I don't have to be 10-2. I can be 4-0, 5-0, get on the Contender Series.
You can fight tomato cans, get big flashy finishes, and
I think I would love to see the stats on when the Contender Series started at first. It was there might be one, maybe two guys get signed on a show. Now it's 5 guys. They're signing almost sometimes they sign both.
If Dana doesn't sign a guy, it's like, ooh, sorry, kid.
And
they might lose or like not get signed, and then you see them getting an immediate shot again on the Contender Series, and you're like, hold up now. He got his shot. Like,
yep.
Back of the bus, right? Like, or back of the line. It's like, no, now it's like you get multiple shots.
These past 3 to 4 seasons, the quality of talent is not there. And of course, there's guys that they sign, like, yes, they belong in the UFC without a doubt. But there's so many guys that are getting signed so prematurely, then they get in the UFC and they fizzle. It's not helping the whole ecosystem of MMA in my eyes, because you guys think that, all right, I'll fight 5 guys, shitty records, I'll get on Contender Series, get signed. That's taking away fights from, outside to put quality fights to grow you. And it's not even taken from me as a fighter at my stage of my career. It's like the up and comers, maybe the guys that are, right there.
The argument could be made, though, that the Contender Series is causing for more people to get signed to the UFC as opposed to the Ultimate Fighter, which would then, by proxy, say better for the sport. More guys are going to the UFC.
Do you want quantity or quality?
That's a good response.
Because the guys that like I said, Grant was on the first season of the Contender Series. There's a lot of quality guys from the first, I'm going to say 6 to 7 seasons. Past 2 to 3, the guys that they're signing, majority are not ready. There's so many guys, in my opinion, that are, and I would love to see the stats if there was any way for me to find out on what their records are if the guys signed
and how they've done in the UFC after being, that'd be interesting as well. I'll say one thing that I know everyone could probably agree with. It's hurt the Ultimate Fighter. Like, the Ultimate Fighter compared to the Contender Series now, I think by even Dana White's admission is like, no one pays attention to Tough anymore the way they do Contender
And they
Series.
weren't even paying attention to it before the Contender Series came out. Like,
Yeah.
they took a hiatus for a handful of years of
Yeah.
even doing the show.
Because they were trying to find, but the problem is they were trying to find like gimmicky ways to do it. Like I remember the one that made like the weirdest sense to me. Do you remember when the flyweights did one and like the winner of Tough got to fight?
Yeah, Tim
to
Elliott.
Tim
fought.
Elliott won, and that's okay. Theory and application, because Tim Elliott actually made that into a fight. But let me say theory first, right? Does it make sense to put 16 people in a house and say the winner of this will then fight the then quote unquote arguable GOAT of MMA for their first fight in the UFC? You're getting a UFC title shot. Now the premise of this was like all former UFC guys. But could you imagine if you're like top 5, top 10 in the UFC and you're like, what the fuck? These 16 guys that got kicked from the UFC are now getting this opportunity to then immediately fight. You're not in the UFC, so why are you fighting for the belt over guys that are in the top 10? And you're kind of like springboarding people to a fight that they probably shouldn't have. It just so happened that it worked out. And Tim Elliott's a motherfucker, and he's a beast.
Right.
But, like, on paper, that should have failed.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the genius of it. Like,
right.
they made it work.
Something different.
But they needed gimmicks like that for people. I'll be the first person to tell you, I love MMA, and I tune in for that season. But I couldn't tell you like the seasons to and
Right.
from. You know what I mean? Even the season with like Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really watch that
Me
one.
neither.
If you and Lucas Clay were on there, either or, if it was one of you or both of you, I guarantee you I would have watched it because I have skin in the game with
Right.
guys from my local town. And I think maybe that's like the goal of the Ultimate Fighter is like if we get someone from this part of the globe and that part of the globe, we'll just get the
Right.
views by proxy. Maybe. I don't know. But then that's like goes back to your thing of like, are we trying to put the best fighters in the UFC or are we trying to sell a product? I don't know, man.
And I think that's where they're at. They're at
Selling a
they're
product.
trying to
mode.
keep the scale balanced, and it's frustrating for someone like me where I'm at. I mean, look at Pantoja, the 125-pound champ. He's getting ready to fight Kai Asakura, who's first fight in the UFC, bringing him from
One FC, yeah.
And I get it. Pantoja's fought and beaten everybody.
But then I think the top 5 or top 6, and I don't think they want to do rematches quite yet.
And they're bringing this guy in.
But imagine you're Kai Kara France, and you just knocked out what's the guy? Ursig. It's like you're like, yo, what the fuck am I? Chopped liver? Like I'm ready for my shot, and I would say that he deserves the
Right.
next shot. I don't know.
It's
I'm not the UFC brass. Maybe you know what it is. Maybe that's a long play into getting into the Chinese market. You know what I mean? Bring that guy over,
Right.
cross homogenization. ONE FC wants to do it because, you know,
makes them look good if he comes in and wins.
if he wins, the UFC is kind of rolling the dice on this one because if he does come in there and like starches Pantoja in like the first round, well, suddenly the part where we were talking about UFC fighters having the best fighters in the world, it's not, you know, you can't extrapolate that to all the divisions, but you now have
Right.
like an outlier. You have an argument.
and it's fighting, so you're always rolling the dice.
Yeah.
But I would almost guarantee you that Pantoja is favorably matched to win this fight, but for that reason right there, that the UFC wants him to roll over this guy and be like, hey, well,
Anything can happen, but if you're a betting man, I'd put my money on Pantoja.
you know, they want it to look like, hey, we brought this guy in who's a stud, and Pantoja just dog walked him. makes their brand look
Even
so much,
better.
you know. And I guarantee it's at that level. And Pantoja trains down at the gym, and great dude, very hardworking, not like a brash guy, you know, quiet, you know, comes up to you, says his greetings, works hard, goes home, and I respect that. That's the kind of champ I want, you know. But that's why there's so many different. That's why we love this game, man. There's
Yeah.
so many different ways.
Personalities, skill set, techniques. MMA is beautiful. I love it. I do think that there's so many aspects to it that put the arts in martial arts, and I'm glad that in some ways, like that's where my life kind of traveled towards. Let me ask you one last question before we kind of wrap up things today, and if there's something you want to say, or actually, I have 2 more questions if you don't mind. Number one, at this point now, you just came off that win. What's next? Are you talking with Jason? Are you guys trying to get something short term, or are you in the talks with the UFC with Sean Shelby and them? Like, hey, you told me to go fight some guys. I fought some guys. I won. Are you looking at maybe like one more locally? What are where are the winds blowing right now?
So, pretty much, you're pretty dang close to it. 6-fight winning streak. Said win a couple.
How many more guys
he
I
did
gotta
this. First thing is Grant's fighting Diego Fajeda on, January 18th. So, going back this weekend, gonna get him ready for his fight because me and Grant are both always in each other's corners. So, gonna help Grant, do whatever I can there, be training, be back in the gym, see what's up, short notice wise. If there's anything that's promising for us to hop on, hopefully be able to jump in on. But if not, I would like to get something on the books just so I can just keep this train rolling, So, into January, maybe early February, I just wanted that little bit of a bigger break because I fought 4 times in a calendar year.
It's cute that you say bigger break. You're talking about like what, 3
Right.
weeks, a month? Oh my
Right.
God, such a big break.
So, yeah, that, nothing comes before then. I would like to fight again into January, February. So, and then just keep knocking them out, man. I don't care how many it takes. I'm going to keep foot on the gas.
And then I guess, my last question would be this, and it's something I wish I would have asked Sean Woodson, but it was only after he left that I kind of wanted to pick his brain on. If it wasn't fighting, what do you think you'd be doing right now? What kind of guy do you think you'd be?
Not a good one, man. For real.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have my wife if it wasn't for fighting. I wouldn't have the people I have around me. Probably would have been partying all the time, working a job I hate doing, probably construction, drinking every night after work. Who knows who the woman I would be with wouldn't be quality as the one I have, that's for dang sure. Just God put the choices in front of me, and everyone makes wrong choices in life, but sometimes you have to make the right ones in certain situations. And I've been blessed enough to make the right ones when they count. So I just, one for fighting, man. I owe this sport so much. Just the people that it's put in front of me and how they have molded me and shaped me, and this sport has. Man, I love it. I'm truly grateful for it, and I owe it everything, man. I wouldn't be anything without it.
Dakota, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule. I know that you only have so much time here with like family and everything, and it means a lot that you can sit down with me for 3 hours and
No, I
shoot
had
the
a
shit,
blast, man. I appreciate
Seriously.
it, man.
Dakota Bush, I'm a fan, and I can't wait for your next fight, brother.
Yes, sir. Thanks, brother.